Chapter 447. The saint followed behind Fang Xingjian, and her gaze was attracted by the various goods. This was a place where most of the factions in the great western region were gathered. There were all sorts of heavenly and earthly treasures, and this was not something that the Horned Frog's Valley, where she had come from, could compare to. Although they were all temporary stalls, each stall took up quite a lot of space, ranging from 20 to 50 square meters. Moreover, even the weakest person setting up the stall was a knight apprentice, and each stall was run by a first transition expert. They could easily set up stone tables and stools, and the better ones would even bring along all sorts of tables and chairs. It was more like those exhibitions and expositions on Earth. Fang Xingjian sniffed and followed a medicinal fragrance to a stall. He saw that there were all sorts of medicinal pills placed there. An attendant walked over, grinning, and said, "Mister, how are you? What would you like to see? Our Unicorn Trade Association has been a knight medicinal herb merchant for 80 years. We have all sorts of cultivating medicinal herbs." The name Unicorn Trade Association seemed to have nothing to do with martial arts factions. However, in reality, most of the factions in the Empire were not purely martial arts factions. On the surface, most of the factions were a combination of trade associations, religions, and various interest groups. On the surface, their businesses could be opening schools, accepting disciples, running trade associations, engaging in all sorts of cultivation, training medicinal herbs, armors, hunting, and other activities. In the dark, they could be assassinations, mercenaries, ambushes, underground fights, and other illegal activities. The Unicorn Trade Association was clearly a faction that combined the interests of medicinal herbs. This was indeed the case. The Unicorn Trade Association was initially founded by a few wild knights who dealt in medicinal herbs. Later on, as their business grew, they gained more and more subordinates, and their influence gradually expanded. They became an organization that was half faction and half trade association. There were countless similar organizations in the Empire. In fact, there were even more of them than pure martial arts factions. After all, only by doing business and earning money would one be able to expand their influence rapidly. Otherwise, if it was just a few people or several tens of people gathering together to purely cultivate, it would be hard for them to achieve great things without attaining the second transition. Fang Xingjian glanced at the various medicinal herbs on the table and asked, "I need medicine that can speed up the condensation of specialties and increase one's potential. Do you have any?" The attendant smiled, took a small box, and opened it. He pointed to a crimson-red medicinal pill that was as heavy as metal and said, "This is our latest invention, the Crimson Fire Pill. As a cultivator, you should know that we need to replenish a large amount of energy during our daily cultivation, right? However, ordinary food has too many impurities and lacks nutrition. Even if we eat it, we have to waste our qi and blood to digest it. However, this Scarlet Fire Pill is different. This is the food we specially prepared for cultivators. One Scarlet Fire Pill is enough to replenish the energy of a first transition cultivator for a day. Long-term consumption can even nourish the human body's bones and muscles, increase one's potential, and increase the possibility of condensing specialties." Fang Xingjian casually took the Scarlet Fire Pill and sniffed it. He could smell a strong medicinal fragrance. It was obvious that it contained the essence of countless herbs. "Interesting." Fang Xingjian put down the medicine list and continued, "But while this thing can be eaten by ordinary first transition experts, it won't be sufficient for experts of a higher level. Since you guys are developing this daily medicinal pill, there should be one that can be used by second transition experts, right? Take it out and let us have a look." A gleam flashed in the attendant's eyes, and he said shamefully, "So you're a second transition expert. I apologize for my lack of manners. Please come with me." Seeing that Fang Xingjian did not refute his probing, the attendant understood that he had tacitly agreed to it. Therefore, he became even more enthusiastic and led Fang Xingjian to his seat. He then took out a few boxes from a cabinet and placed them before Fang Xingjian. His careful manner made it seem as if the boxes contained some priceless treasures. There were also people who saw this scene and unknowingly gathered over, wanting to see what the attendant was trying to sell. The attendant carefully opened one of the boxes and saw a crystalline and translucent medicinal pill that seemed to have flames burning within it. The moment the box was opened, streams of hot air were emitted. Looking at the medicinal pill that seemed to be burning with flames, everyone present could not take their eyes off it. The Ice Palace's saint was even more astonished. When had she ever seen such a miraculous medicinal pill? Seeing this, the attendant broke into a proud expression and said, "This is the fire deity medicine that our Unicorns Trade Association has created after many years of painstaking research. It's specially created for second transition experts. It gathers the fire nature of the sun in the sky and condenses over 1,000 types of nutritional essences, using the fire nature of the sun to remove impurities. Even a second transition expert would be able to go without food or water for 7 days with just one pill, gaining over 10,000 potential points. Oh, it's really good stuff." As the attendant spoke, a hunchbacked old man with a goatee walked over. He took the fire deity medicine from the table and asked, "How much is it?" "I'll take it." The attendant threw the old man with a goatee in surprise. At the next moment, he recognized him and said, "Lord Black Spear." This Black Spear was one of the second transition experts from the Black Wings, one of the 3 great factions in the Great Western region. The Black Wings was a mercenary organization that had been around for several decades. They often accepted employment to participate in all sorts of assassinations, infiltrations, arena battles, and so on. They even participated in external battles. The people in this organization placed the most emphasis on actual combat, and their various martial techniques were extremely murderous. What they passed down were true killing techniques on the battlefield, and they tended to be the most fearless when doing things. Moreover, Black Spear could be considered a regular customer of the Unicorns Trade Association. After he arrived, he appeared even more arrogant and bossy. Black Spear stroked his goatee and said, I'm asking you. How much is this?" "I'll take it." The attendant threw a glance at Fong Xingjian, a little troubled. After all, he was the one who had first introduced this to Fong Xingjian. However, Black Spear was a veteran second transition expert, and he even had the Black Wings behind him. The attendant did not dare to offend him. Just then, Fong Xingjian said, "First come, first served. I've already taken a liking to this fire deity medicine. No matter how much it costs, I'll buy it. You'd better wait until next time." "Oh." Black Spear frowned and looked toward Fong Xingjian and the Ice Palace's saint. He searched through his memories, but was unable to recall their identities. Therefore, he asked, "Lad, which faction are you from?" With just a gaze and a question, an endless pressure came gushing forth. Under the impact of the will, the Ice Palace's saint started to tremble. However, as Fong Xingjian patted her gently on the shoulder, she immediately recovered, feeling extremely peaceful and at ease. "Ice Palace, vicious knight." As Fong Xingjian spoke, he stood up, and an aura that seemed to be able to penetrate through the heavens and earth gushed forth. The people in the surroundings retreated, feeling as if a great mountain was pressing down on them. The tremendous power made it impossible for them to withstand it. Black Spear's countenance changed as well. However, he was a veteran level 25 expert after all. Although he also felt a great pressure, it was still within the limits of what he could withstand. Moreover, he had searched through the top-notch factions in the Great Western region several times, but none of them were called the Ice Palace. There was only the Horned Frogs Valley's Ice Palace. At the thought of this, Black Spear felt a surge of confidence and said, "Lad, it's true that our Black Wings urgently needs this item. If you let me have it today, our Black Wings will remember this favor." Although the other party was just a small faction, Black Spear did not treat them with violence. Instead, he tried to persuade them nicely. If the other party was still stubborn, then they should not blame him for not holding back. Chapter 448. Is that so? Fong Xingjian suddenly smiled. Then let's just see who offers the highest price. He then took out a stack of paper and placed it on the table. "I'll offer 100,000 gold." I want all of your fire deity medicine. The attendant picked it up and exclaimed, "The central bank's gold certificates. It's really 100,000 gold." The old man who was addressed as Black Spear was stunned for a moment, looking at Fong Xingjian in disbelief. 100,000 gold. Even if he were to take it out in one go, he would still feel great pain. It was almost a quarter of his fortune. However, it had been tossed onto the table by Fong Xingjian lightly, as if he were tossing a few dollars. He could not help but snatch the gold certificate from the attendant's hand and take a closer look at it. Then he glared at Fong Xingjian and said, "You're really offering 100,000 gold?" Fong Xingjian said slowly, "That's right. If you offer a higher price than this, then I'll admit it and let you have it. What do you think?" He did not seem to value the 100,000 gold at all. This was the truth. With his current wealth, 100,000 gold was really nothing much. Hearing that this man who claimed to be the vicious knight was really going to spend 100,000 gold to buy the fire deity medicine, everyone present was astonished and started to whisper amongst themselves. The Ice Palace's female saint also looked at Fong Xingjian in astonishment, as if she had not expected Fong Xingjian to be so rich. Black Spear's countenance alternated between shades of green and white. He wanted to offer a price, but felt great pain in his heart. To him, 100 gold was at most a portion of fire deity medicine, and 10 gold would be able to buy 1,000 portions. That would be enough to last them for 20 years. Who would be stupid enough to offer so much money? In the end, he was unable to offer a price. He merely glared at Fong Xingjian and said, "Ice Palace's vicious knight, right? I'll remember that." He then turned to leave, as if not wanting to give Fong Xingjian another chance to humiliate him. Fong Xingjian smiled, not saying a word. This time around, he had come with the identity of the Ice Palace to sweep through the factions in the Great Western region. Naturally, he did not plan on keeping a low profile. However, the attendant said with a troubled expression, "Sir, we've only brought 120 portions of fire deity medicine this time around. Your 100,000 gold is too much." "It's fine. Can you introduce me to some of your other cultivation medicines?" Therefore, the attendant excitedly started to introduce the other cultivation herbs. Throughout the entire process, Fong Xingjian once again displayed what it meant to be willful with money. As long as it was something useful to him, he would buy it all at once. However, the many boxes were placed next to Fong Xingjian. The Ice Palace's saint was no longer able to hold them all. When Fong Xingjian saw this scene, he put out his palm. Tyrant activated the gates of the netherworld and engulfed all the goods. This scene instantly astonished countless people. The Ice Palace's saint also looked at Fong Xingjian with a strange gaze and could not help but ask, "What is this?" "It's just a little toy that can store things," Fong Xingjian said lightly. However, it was clear that the countless people in the surroundings were not as calm as he was. Distorting and pulling out space, or even fixing the distorted space, forming a unique alternate space, and storing physical objects in it. This was something that only some divine-level experts were able to do. How is this possible? He can actually put things into a different dimension? This is something only a deity can do. Could he be a deity? How could he be a deity? I think it's because of that bracelet of his. Divine remains equipment. These 4 words appeared in everyone's mind in an instant. Countless people stared at Fong Xingjian's bracelet with greedy eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that they were not strong enough, and that this was the venue hosted by the Eternal Night Society, they would have long since charged up to snatch it. It was because in the legends, only divine remains equipment could store items in alternate dimensions. On the other side, the attendant continued to introduce various items to Fong Xingjian. "Sir, this is a blood-exchanging pill. It can clear up the blood vessels in the human body, even the trash in the capillaries. It can improve the human body's physique, help in condensing the specialty, seething vital qi in blood, and increase the efficiency of the cultivator's vital energy and blood circulation. 1 pill costs 1,000 gold. I'll take all of them." The attendant was grinning so widely that his eyes could no longer be seen. He continued to take out a long box and open the lid, revealing a thin piece that was translucent with 7 colors. This is the Seven Seas Fish King ointment that our Unicorn Trade Association's chief spent 3 months capturing in the North Sea, using the Fish King's essence to make. After consuming it, it can help in condensing the specialty's underwater breathing, internal circulation, and water-splitting physique. How much is it? 10,000 gold. I'll take it. Fang Xingjian nodded. When the Ice Palace's saint saw this scene, her eyes rolled back, and she became numb. She finally knew that Fang Xingjian was extremely wealthy. He was too rich. However, while she was numb, she also felt a hint of envy. Money? Who wouldn't like it? This was especially the case when Fang Xingjian was so rich. He had bought so many cultivating materials and medicinal herbs, which would be of great help to her cultivation. Rich, powerful, and also had a mysterious background. She suddenly felt extremely interested in Fang Xingjian. The number of spectators at the side increased. Seeing how Fang Xingjian was throwing out large amounts of money, everyone's eyes were filled with envy and jealousy. There were also people who took note of Fang Xingjian's appearance and identity and started to find out more about the Ice Palace's background. However, there were also people who secretly looked at Fang Xingjian as if they were looking an idiot. He's really a profligate son, revealing his wealth like this. This is a martial arts exchange gathering in the Great Western region. All the top-notch experts in the entire Great Western region are here. There are many crouching tigers and hidden dragons, and it's unknown how many experts there are. To be throwing out money so arrogantly in a place like this. He's really courting death. Haha, to be flaunting his wealth like this and even reveal his dimensional storage equipment. I think that the Ice Palace won't have many good days ahead of them. Hee, the Blackwing's Black Spear has already set his eyes on him. He might be snatched away in a few days' time. Dimensional storage equipment was a strategic piece of equipment. Against experts who were not at the divine level, how terrifying was it to be able to take away the other party's weapons, equipment, and even take away the other party's attacks? Even if it was used for concealment, assassination, or theft, it was almost omnipotent. It was especially useful for breaking through all sorts of defenses. By using dimensional storage equipment to take away the other party's defenses, regardless of whether it was city walls, steel plates, or divine armors, it would be able to break through just by taking it away gently. How valuable was dimensional storage equipment? Anyone who saw it would have a greedy heart. The few of them looked at Fang Xingjian, rejoicing in his misfortune. However, Fang Xingjian seemed as if he did not feel anything. After browsing through the Unicorn Trade Association, he continued to shop at the other booths. He mainly bought various cultivating materials, especially items that could help in condensing specialty seeds and increase one's potential. He bought almost everything he saw. Chapter 449. Sir, this is an excellent product from the north. It's a level 25 superior divine weapon, the electromagnetic flying sword. An old man introduced as he held up a long sword that was surrounded by streams of electricity. Look, it can increase the attractive force of the various components at will. It can also split up to fly and perform long-distance assassinations. Fang Xingjian shook his head. Such a weapon was flashy, but impractical. Moreover, it was not as powerful as his own finger sword, so he naturally did not think much of it. Just then, a large group of people headed in Fang Xingjian's direction. The person in the lead was in high spirits. He had thick bones and was like a tiger with an eagle's gaze. He was like an eagle that had swooped down from the sky, exuding an insufferably arrogant disposition. This person was one of the vice guild leaders of the Eternal Night Society. He was a level 27 second transition expert, and he was known as Night Eagle. Seeing Night Eagle's arrival, everyone present gasped in astonishment. Everyone subconsciously took a step back. It could be seen that Night Eagle was very powerful in the Great Western region. The Ice Palace's saint could not help but tug at Fang Xingjian's sleeves, as if wanting him to turn around. However, when the man walked up to Fang Xingjian continued to look at the electromagnetic flying sword without moving, as if that was the most important thing. Night Eagle scanned the surroundings. Like an eagle king checking out its territory, His gaze eventually landed on Feng Xingjian and said, "You must be the Ice Palace's vicious knight. What do you want?" As Feng Xingjian spoke, he started to choose the next item. His back was still facing Night Eagle, as if he did not think much of him at all. A hint of fury flashed in Night Eagle's heart. However, he was a shrewd person. Although he was furious, he did not show any of it on his face. He continued to say, "I heard that you have a dimensional storage equipment. I wonder if that's true?" "I do," Feng Xingjian said. Night Eagle's brows furrowed, and he said respectfully, "Our Eternal Night Society wishes to purchase this dimensional storage equipment. The price isn't a problem. I wonder if you're willing to part with it?" "I'm not selling," Feng Xingjian said casually and walked to the next booth. However, sensing Night Eagle's gaze and the pressure from countless other people's gazes, the Ice Palace's saint felt that her movements were stiff. It was as if nothing she did was right. However, Night Eagle was not infuriated. Dimensional storage equipment and divine remains equipment. How precious were these items? It was the right thing for the other party to reject the sale right from the start. If the other party had agreed to sell it so easily, he would have doubted the authenticity of the spatial equipment. Moreover, for the Ice Palace to suddenly obtain a spatial divine tool and act so ostentatiously, they were either crazy or plotting something. They must have some backing behind them. Before getting to the bottom of things, the Eternal Night Society wouldn't casually make a move. They would only negotiate first. Therefore, after hearing Feng Xingjian's words, Night Eagle continued to say, "Don't you want to hear our offer? You will definitely be satisfied." Saying that, he did not care if Feng Xingjian agreed or not and offered directly gold certificates for 2 million gold. You can choose any 5 of the Eternal Night Society's top-notch amassing techniques and killing techniques. Moreover, our chief is willing to help you 3 times unconditionally. Hearing this series of conditions, everyone present was visibly moved. Firstly, 2 million gold certificates was already a huge sum. It was something that many small factions would not be able to earn in their entire lives. Then, the Eternal Night Society's 5 top-notch amassing techniques, waves and mental cultivation method, and killing techniques made many wild knights drool. Why were small factions weak? One reason was because they had little resources. Another reason was that their cultivation methods were too weak and outdated. Moreover, the Eternal Night Society's chief would help them 3 times unconditionally. He was a great second transition level 29 expert to be able to help them 3 times unconditionally. This will allow them to do as they pleased in the Great Western region. Everyone looked at Feng Xingjian with envious gazes. Knowing that he belonged to the Ice Palace, they were even more certain that he would agree. It was because the Ice Palace was a small faction that lacked martial arts and experts. How could the other party not agree? However, at this moment, another long whistle rang out, and a white-haired, white-bearded old man in a white robe walked over with majestic strides. Before he even arrived, an invisible pressure came rushing over, directly pushing the crowd away. Dimensional storage equipment? Divine remains equipment? How can you not inform our Illumination Society about such a major matter? The Eternal Night Society has not done a good job in organizing the event this time around. When the time comes, I'll have to have a good talk with that Night Emperor of yours." Seeing the appearance of the elderly man who had spoken, everyone present was surprised. Then they all had the attitude of watching a good show. It was because the person who had come was the Illumination Society's Radiant Envoy, a level 28 second transition expert. Just from their names, one could tell that the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society had very different objectives. Although they were both religions, one of them worshipped the Dark Night, believing that everything in the world would eventually return to eternal darkness. The other one worshipped light, believing that the beginning of the world came from the first beam of light. Light came first before the world came into existence, and light came first before life came into existence. The two sects had always been entangled and fighting with each other. If it was not because the Empire was suppressing the Great Western region and the Black Wings was eyeing them covetously, the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society would have long since engaged in a great battle to the death. Looking at the radiant envoy, Night Eagle smiled coldly and said, "The appearance of dimensional storage equipment isn't part of our arrangements. This is a transaction between us. What has it got to do with the organization of the gathering? Is that so? That's good. Our Illumination Society is also very interested in your dimensional storage equipment. However, we don't need you to sell it to us. The equipment will still be yours, but we hope that you can join us." The Radiant Envoy shouted, 1,500,000 gold. You can freely browse through our Illumination Society's manuals. We've specially invited you to be our Illumination Society's honorary chief. In the future, the Illumination Society and the Ice Palace will forever be on the same side. The Illumination Society's honorary chief was equivalent to an external Radiant Envoy, and his status would not be much lower than that of the Radiant Envoy himself. It would mean that he would instantly become one of the top 5 characters in the Illumination Society. Of course, there would definitely be many things that he could not do. However, no matter what, as long as he agreed to it, it would mean that he would have the Illumination Society as his backing. The Eternal Night Society's Night Eagle smiled and said, "Who knows if you guys are plotting against someone else's foundation?" The Radiant Envoy said calmly, "Our Illumination Society has always had strict rules. All forms of killing and internal strife are strictly forbidden. Once you join us, you'll be eternal brothers." Night Eagle said, "Vicious Knight, if you're willing to join our Eternal Night Society, the chief will agree to take you in as his personal disciple. The conditions mentioned above will remain the same. There's also no need for you to leave the Ice Palace. The Ice Palace and the Eternal Night Society can become an alliance of brothers in the future." Regardless of what backing the Ice Palace or the Vicious Knight had behind them, Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy felt that the conditions they had proposed were extremely generous. It could be said that it was a win-win situation. Their goal was to pull the possessor of the dimensional storage equipment over to their side, no matter what. As for how they would be allies in the future and how they would start to secretly rob him, they would have to wait until they found out what the other party's trump card was. In the booth, everyone looked at Feng Xingjian with envious gazes. Regardless of which one he chose, it would be equivalent to him leaping into the top echelon of the Great Western Region's factions. From then on, he would have a strong background and be at a high position. Even a third-rate sect like the Ice Palace would be able to make a great leap. However, faced with the invitations from 2 great influences, Feng Xingjian did not even throw them a glance. He said calmly, "I don't need your conditions, nor do I need your protection. I'm not interested in your deal at all." Night Eagle's countenance turned a little grim. "Are you sure? You stayed in the Ice Palace for too long and might not be clear about the situation outside. I know very well that the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society are both one of the 3 great factions in the Great Western Region. Your leaders are also level 29 experts." As he said this, Feng Xingjian only felt that it was funny. It was because the conditions the other party had proposed were not worth mentioning at all. Feng Xingjian continued, "But if you want me to join and your chief personally comes to invite me to be your leader, then there's still a possibility." As he said this, Feng Xingjian shook his head. He felt that even if the other party really came to invite him, he could not be bothered to manage 2 religions. Chapter 450. The moment Feng Xingjian said the truth, a commotion broke out. Night Eagle looked at Feng Xingjian coldly. In his heart, he had already categorized Feng Xingjian as an arrogant and ignorant young man who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. It was the same for the Radiant Envoy. The Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society were 2 great religions. What was a religion? The word belief could be used to describe all religions. To the 2 of them, Feng Xingjian's words were a serious insult to their religion. Therefore, killing intent rose in their hearts. Moreover, they felt that they had already been extremely polite and courteous. How could they have expected that Feng Xingjian would reject them like this? Night Eagle said coldly, "Young man, you better be careful with your words. There are many times when many things can't be said casually. Every day, there are people who die in the wilderness because of their careless words. He did not take action directly, but only gave a warning. However, if Fang Xingjian were to continue spouting nonsense, then even if they were not allowed to fight during the gathering, even if they did not know what the vicious knight's backing was, in order to protect their faction's dignity, he would still take action to teach Fang Xingjian a lesson. The radiant envoy from the Illumination Society shook his head and tried to persuade Fang Xingjian. Young man, didn't your Ice Palace's great priestess teach you anything before you left? Although you're also a second transition expert, do you really think that you'll be able to keep your dimensional storage equipment if you casually expose it to the many factions in the Great Western region? To be honest, if you don't choose the Eternal Night Society or our Illumination Society today, you'll probably meet with misfortune the moment you leave the mountain after the gathering ends. This is especially so for the Black Wings. That bunch of battle maniacs aren't as easy to talk to as we are. Fang Xingjian waved his hand, not saying much to the other party. In any case, when the time came for the martial arts sparring, he would go up directly and help the Ice Palace to defeat all the other factions, becoming the #1 in the Great Western region. He would then gather the authority of all the factions. At the sight of this scene, the Radiant Envoy could not help but say inwardly, he really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Night Eagle took a long look at Fang Xingjian and then left. To them, Fang Xingjian's confidence was simply ridiculous. If he didn't have a huge backing, then he was a lunatic. As a veteran faction in the Great Western region, they had a wide range of information channels. Before they got to the bottom of the Ice Palace's backing, they would naturally not make a move without saying anything. This was something that only those small factions, fugitives, hotheads, or true experts and maniacs would do. In reality, if it wasn't for the fact that the spatial equipment was too important, they would definitely have gathered all the information about the Ice Palace before coming to discuss. However, the spatial equipment was too important, so they had no choice but to discuss it first. However, he did not expect the other party to reject him so decisively. However, the other small sects did not have such boldness. The surrounding onlookers looked at Fang Xingjian with all sorts of greedy, jealous, envious, and pitiful gazes. A few of them nodded at each other, an evil glint flashing in their eyes. However, with the Eternal Night Association suppressing everyone, no one dared to make a move immediately. A small number of rational people who had not been engulfed by their desires shook their heads. They felt that there must be a deeper reason for the Ice Palace's people to do this, and they must have some backing. Faced with temptation, most people would be tempted, and a small portion of people would remain rational. As long as someone were to make a move first, it was likely that there would be more and more people joining in. However, with the Eternal Night Society suppressing everyone, there were very few people who would dare to make a move first. Therefore, after the Illumination Society and the Eternal Night Society were both rejected, no one else came to harass Fang Xingjian. He strolled around, bought a large pile of things, and then returned to the Ice Palace's encampment to start cultivating. His cultivation lasted until the night before the martial arts exchange. During this period of time, when he was cultivating, the entire gathering was peaceful. However, more and more wild nights rushed over. Countless gloomy, murderous, and greedy cultivators walked around, often observing something outside the Ice Palace's encampment. Even the Ice Palace's disciples would be followed and observed when they went out. However, strangely, there were no conflicts. It was as if something was brewing. In the living room, the Ice Palace's female saint said unhappily, "Master, this Fang Xingjian is too much. He's causing trouble for our Ice Palace by swaggering around like this. Recently, there have been at least 100 people observing outside our encampment, harboring malicious intentions." The Ice Palace's great priestess shook her head and said, "You don't understand. Fang Xingjian's level is unfathomable. Unfathomable." The Ice Palace's female saint did not think much of it. She only felt that no matter how amazing Fang Xingjian was or how much of a genius he was, how could he be a match for the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society, which had many experts? Just then, the door to the living room was opened with a bang, and two black-robed people dashed in. They stood on the left and right, and their heads were covered with black cloth, revealing only a pair of eyes that revealed endless craftiness, brutality, malevolence, and killing intent. It was as if all living things in the world were naked prey in their eyes. There was a feeling that they could kill all living things in the world. It was the style of a fanatic. Just by exchanging a glance, the Ice Palace's great priestess and saint seemed to have been frozen by the other party's gaze. Their bodies paused for a moment before they were able to continue moving. Their eyes were filled with terror, but their bodies continued to move instinctively, sending streams of cold air gushing out. This was especially so for the Ice Palace's great priestess. As a second transition expert, she could mobilize the power of ether particles. With this burst of cold air, she instantly condensed over 100 ice shields in front of her, attempting to fend off the attacks of the two black-robed men. However, when faced with these layers of ice shields, the two black-robed men only drew out the long swords at their waists. Then layers of fog were emitted from their palms and blades. They were vibrating their palms and blades at high speed. It was as if they were using their physical bodies to achieve the effect of a high-frequency saber. Every second, the blades would vibrate several thousand times. Amidst loud banging sounds, the ice shields, which could fend off the main cannons of tanks, were shattered by the black-robed men's long swords like fireworks. Ice shards shot out in all directions, and the two black-robed men dashed up to the saint and the great priestess as if there was no one around. The long swords slashed out, bringing with them a dreamlike fog. In that instant, it made one feel as if everything was a dream of life and death. There was no difference between life and death, and it was as if it was not a bad thing to die just like that. With a single slash, not only did it produce an unrivaled destructive prowess, it was also able to snatch away one's mind, causing one to be unable to resist at all. It brought with it a feeling that life and death were like illusions. Just as the great priestess and saint were about to die under the two dreamlike longswords, an extremely fair and delicate palm reached out. Each of the pores on the palm had disappeared due to the extreme density of the skin. It was as if it was a palm made of jade. If one were to say that the black-robed men's long swords were like illusions of life and death, then everything would be an illusion, and it would not matter even if one died. Then the fair and jade-like palm before them was extremely realistic. It was extremely domineering, and violent power pressed down on every inch of the human skin. It would make one feel what was reality and what was reality, and it would wake them up from their endless dreams with a single slap. The palm pressed down gently on one of the sword wounds, and cracks instantly spread across the entire blade. At the next moment, the blade shattered, and the black-robed man was sent flying. In midair, his body had already been torn apart by the extremely violent palm force, and he exploded into a cloud of blood mist in midair. The other black-robed man's eyes widened, and he revealed a horrified expression as he retreated rapidly. However, at the next moment, he only saw a black shadow flash, and the white palm had once again appeared before him, grabbing tightly onto his head. The black-robed man let out an enraged bellow, and his long swords swung out repeatedly. As they vibrated at high speed, they brought along a layer of dreamlike fog as they slashed out toward Feng Xingjian. However, the long swords, which could cut through armor plates as if they were paper, did not produce any other effects when they slashed down on Feng Xingjian's body, other than creating a series of sparks as if metal had clashed against each other. The black-robed man looked at Feng Xingjian in disbelief and said, "How is this possible? My illusory blade can even slash through a city wall. To think that you're using your physical body to block it. How on earth did you do it?" Behind him, the great priestess and saint ran out as well. They happened to see the scene of Feng Xingjian allowing the black-robed man to slash at him. They looked at everything in great astonishment. However, when they thought of how Feng Xingjian had once activated the heavenly thunders to temper his body in the Horned Frog's Valley, they felt that this was only natural. However, Feng Xingjian smiled coldly and said, "Speak." Who sent you here? That black-robed man's gaze was savage, and he stared at Fong Xinjian like a venomous snake. He said, "Vicious knight, it's true that you're more powerful than we imagined. However, you're too arrogant. To think that you would dare to expose the matter of your dimensional storage equipment here. Do you know how many desperate people have rushed over the past few days for the sake of your dimensional storage equipment? Even if we fail today, there will still be an endless stream of experts who will come looking for you tonight. There will be level 28 or even level 29 experts. Will you be able to fend off 1 or 2 batches? Or even 10 or 20 batches? You won't be able to fend them off." Fong Xinjian smiled in disdain. He was about to say something when he suddenly tilted his head and said calmly, "There really are people who are rushing over to die." At the next moment, amidst the agonizing cries of the black-robed man, Fong Xinjian grabbed his head and sent him flying out together with Fong Xinjian. Chapter 451. Watching as Fong Xinjian grabbed the man in black by the head and carried him out, disappearing into the darkness in the blink of an eye, the great priest sighed and said, "This person's abilities are probably above level 29. He might have already completed the first tier of perfection in his body's toughness. It's hard to imagine how astonishing it would be if he were to go all out." On the other side, 3 black-clothed men looked at the Ice Palace's base from afar. The person in the middle was Black Spear, a level 25 expert from the Black Wings, who had snatched the fire deity medicine from Fong Xinjian earlier. Black Spear said, "We've received reliable information. The strongest expert in the Ice Palace is the Great Priestess, but she's just a country bumpkin at level 22. Tian Sha and the others have already charged in with their men. Later on, we'll charge in as well. We'll kill whoever is alive and take away their dimensional storage equipment. We'll then immediately escape down the mountain. We must be careful of that vicious knight. His dimensional storage equipment can absorb most attacks. Only physical attacks are effective. This is what he's relying on." The other 2 were also second transition experts from the Black Wings. However, they were only at level 22 and 21. They were clearly Black Spear's juniors. Is the information verified? That vicious knight is so arrogant. Does he really not have any other trump cards? Don't worry. This is the leader's secret channel. It's foolproof. One of them asked, "Then what about the Eternal Night Society?" Black Spear said calmly, "The leader will be in charge of intercepting them. In today's operation, their side is the main battlefield. Let's quickly get rid of that arrogant brat. The faster we leave, the less pressure the leader and the others will have to face." At the next moment, the 3 of them disappeared with a flash, dashing rapidly toward the Ice Palace's base. Wherever they passed by, sand and rocks will be sent flying, releasing soft, rustling sounds. However, just as they were halfway there, the sound of thunder reverberated in the atmosphere. Lifting their heads, they saw a black shadow standing quietly before them. Then, a series of agonizing cries rang out. It was only then that everyone saw that the black shadow was grabbing onto a black-clothed man. The black-clothed man had been grabbed by Fong Xinjian and brought over. His body had received strong impacts from the air during the endless speed, and his clothes had been torn apart, and his limbs were twisted. As he sprinted at high speed, the air was like layers of high-density armor plates, and he had to break through several tens of such armor plates every second. Fast. Too fast. This was the only thought in the black-clothed man's mind. His opponent had actually broken through the sound barrier while moving, yet the pressure had already beaten him half to death. Black Spear was slightly taken aback when he saw the man in black. Tian Sha. It turned out that he had recognized this person as a second job transition expert from an organization called the Black Robe Men. He was a level 23 Heaven Fiend. They were also the ones who hired Tian Sha to attack the Ice Palace's base. The Black Robe group that this person belonged to had a notorious reputation. They were a bandit organization through and through, relying on their battle prowess to casually snatch other people's belongings and kill others. They were often wanted by the Great Western Region's government. As the leader of the Black Robe Men, Sky Fiend, and the deputy leader, Earth Fiend, had committed all sorts of crimes. They had even annihilated thousands of people in a small town. However, at this moment, Tian Sha no longer had his usual imposing manner. His face was contorted and filled with fear. He looked at Fang Xingjian as though he was looking at a devil. As for Disha, he had already been killed by Fang Xingjian with a single punch. Fang Xingjian looked at Black Spear and the other two and said, "Are you guys here to kill me?" Black Spear let out a cold laugh and said, "Lad, do you think that you have nothing to fear just because you've captured Tian Sha? To think that you dare to take out a dimensional storage equipment after being so high profile in the market. You really don't know how to write the word death. Right now, regardless of whether it's the Eternal Night Society, the Illumination Society, or our Black Wings, all of them have their eyes on you. However, if you hand over the dimensional storage equipment obediently, I can let you live. Don't think that you'll be able to go up against us just because you have a dimensional storage equipment. Alternate spaces are unable to absorb life. You won't be able to fend off our physical attacks." Seeing that Tian Sha and Earth Fiend had failed, Black Spear still had some reservations and wanted to use words to lower Fang Xingjian's battle will. "Let me live?" Fang Xingjian opened his mouth and let out a silent smile. "Excellent. You've said so much. You can use your life to make up for the rest." As soon as he finished speaking, He Chong felt a boundless, terrifying aura descend from the sky and engulf his body in an overwhelming manner. However, the aura was just a side effect. It was like the ripples created when one's body moved across water. What was truly amazing was Fang Xingjian's fist. Fang Xingjian's fist seemed to have traversed time and space in that instant, appearing before Black Spear. The speed of this punch was too fast, so fast that Black Spear could not react at all. He had no idea what kind of attack Fang Xingjian had used, where he was attacking, or how fast his speed was. The power of this punch was too strong. Seething air currents shot out in all directions, uprooting all the plants and rocks in the surroundings. Black Spear could not even breathe, and his face was flattened by the air currents. He could not even open his eyes. However, Black Spear lived up to his name as an expert from the Black Wings. He had been through trials of life and death, and he had extremely rich experience in all sorts of battles to the death. In that instant, he instinctively understood that he had made a mistake. It was not just an ordinary mistake. It was a grave mistake. Fang Xingjian did not rely on his dimensional storage equipment, nor did he rely on the Ice Palace's abilities. Fang Xingjian had relied on his extremely terrifying abilities. How could the vicious knight before them be an ordinary expert? He was clearly a terrifying expert on the same level as their leader. Although Fang Xingjian had struck out with a punch to the point where Black Spear did not know how to retaliate, Black Spear still let out a furious bellow and unleashed an explosive power, as if he wanted to fight to the death. The auras of a total of 400 specialty seeds rose up from his body, then turned into streams of starlight and exploded. In that instant, Black Spear had completely detonated a total of 400 specialty seeds, wasting over 10 years of hard work. He displayed an unparalleled decisiveness. Then, with the power from the detonation of a total of 400 specialty seeds, Black Spear seemed to have turned into a great metal spear that could pierce through the heavens and break through the earth. Bringing along the state of a desperate counterattack, he thrust his spear forward without a care for anything else. When Black Spear struck out with this move of using himself as a spear, he felt that he had never felt so comfortable before. All the spear arts theories he had learned in the past had been integrated. With this thrust, he felt as if he could even pierce a hole through the sky. However, at the next moment, Fang Xingjian's fist smashed fiercely onto Black Spear's chest. Sword force gushed out and exploded Black Spear's chest with a single punch. Streams of sword force wreaked havoc on Black Spear's chest, turning every single part of his chest into dust. It also destroyed Black Spear's state of wanting to pierce through the heavens. The 2 second transition experts next to Fang Xingjian let out loud bellows. It was only then that they reacted. One from the left and the other from the right, they attacked from both sides. Saber light and sword shadows seemed to encompass every inch of space on Fang Xingjian's body. Under the slashing of the air currents, everything within a range of 100 meters was turned into dust, and grass fragments soared up into the sky. However, under the envelopment of the net of sabers and swords, a series of dang, 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 dang sounds rang out. Feng Xingjian was completely unscathed. Instead, he moved his feet and dashed toward the swordsman, using his body to ram into him. In that instant, the long sword was smashed into dust, and Feng Xingjian crashed into his opponent like a meteor. Violent sword force gushed out with a force that seemed to be tearing the heavens and earth apart, turning a second transition expert into a cloud of blood mist. Feng Xingjian then moved his body and kicked sideways. The tip of his foot pierced through the net of sabers, as if he had teleported. With Feng Xingjian's current cultivation, this kick was like a long sword thrusting out, hitting the waist of the swordsman and cutting him in half. Feng Xingjian did not use any killing technique. With just a punch, a ram, and a kick, he had killed 2 second transition experts and seriously injured one. Even the black-clothed man, Tian Sha, was still being held in his hand. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Black Spear stood on the spot. The vitality of a level 25 expert caused the hole in his chest to squirm incessantly, and his flesh and blood slowly recovered. However, when he looked at Feng Xingjian, his countenance was completely ashen. Good fist technique, good cultivation. It seems that the person who gave me this information is intentionally trying to lure us into becoming cannon fodder, stirring up chaos. Black Spear's mind trembled, and he communicated with Feng Xingjian through information currents. Moreover, an expert like you can't possibly be a nobody. Can you let me know who killed me? You'd better be a muddle-headed ghost. Feng Xingjian opened his mouth and exhaled. The air flowed intensely, rubbing against each other at high speed, turning into the supreme mist wind sword cheese. It tore the head of the level 25 expert before him into dust. Then, Feng Xingjian's feet kept on flashing. Tian Sha felt as if the air before him was smashing toward him like layers of cement. Each time he stopped, he would see blood splattering and the ground reeking of blood. One after another, the experts who wanted to try anything funny or investigate this place were all slapped to death by Feng Xingjian. Chapter 452. With another flash, Feng Xingjian returned to the hall in the Ice Palace's base. Looking at the saint and the great priestess, he casually tossed the black-clothed man onto the ground and said, "I've already dealt with the people who charged in the direction of the Ice Palace's base. You guys can interrogate him and see what you can find out from him." The black-clothed man's eyes were filled with terror. He had seen so many wild knights who were of similar or even stronger than him being killed by Feng Xingjian as if he was dismantling toys. How could he not be terrified? Right now, in his eyes, Feng Xingjian was a terrifying character who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Illumination Society and the Eternal Night Society's chief. Feng Xingjian turned his head and looked into the distance, saying calmly, "They're all together now. Since that's the case, I'll take care of them all in one fell swoop." With that, he took a step forward and moved with a flash. With each flash, he would appear several kilometers away, bringing along strong gales as he dashed toward the foot of the mountain. The great priestess looked at the horrified and heavily injured black-clothed man and asked, "Do you have anything to say?" "Say?" The black-clothed man immediately said, "Say. I'll say everything. It's the Blackwings. The Blackwings were the one who informed me to come over and even said that they would receive me outside. That's why I came here in a daze. I didn't expect the vicious knight to be so powerful. With such abilities and cultivation, the Ice Palace will definitely have a place in the great Western region in the future." He looked at the great priestess and said respectfully, "Please allow me to join the Ice Palace and serve the vicious knight." The great priestess and the saint exchanged a surprised glance. To think that the expert who had almost killed them instantly was begging for mercy so easily. What on earth had he seen? The great priestess walked up and punched out at the black-clothed man who was unable to resist at all. Layers of cold air froze him, turning into an ice coffin in the blink of an eye and encompassing the black-clothed man. The great priestess then called her subordinates in. Watch him. Increase the amount of cold air every 5 minutes. Given his current condition, there's no way he'll be able to escape. The saint could not help but ask, Master, where are you going? To chase after Feng Xingjian, the great priestess said. As the great priestess spoke, her eyes were filled with longing. A battle between top-notch experts in the great western region. What a brilliant and glorious battle. How can I possibly miss it? Since Feng Xingjian had exposed his space teleportation equipment in the trading market, countless wild knights had come to attend the martial arts gathering in the Dark Shadow Mountain in less than 2 days. After the first group of people made their move tonight, more and more people followed suit. It was as if a barrel of gunpowder had been lit. Spatial equipment had always been strategic equipment, and many people coveted it. Moreover, most of the experts from the various factions in the Great Western region had gathered here. It was unknown how many of them had a deep feud with each other. Initially, things had been fine with the 3 great factions suppressing the situation. However, with the Black Wings making a move out of nowhere and the 3 great factions being at loggerheads because of the dimensional storage equipment, the entire Black Shadow Mountain had descended into chaos. However, most of the people were running towards the Ice Palace's base, so more and more people were gathering at the foot of the mountain outside the base. Just then, on the highest peak of the Dark Shadow Mountain, Heavenly Shadow Peak, a one-eyed old man was looking at the blazing flames and seething killing intent at the foot of the mountain. The corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a cold smile. Next to him stood a middle-aged man in snow-white clothes. Even his hair, eyes, and lips were white. He was like a ghost, and if there were any disciples from the School of Sword Arts here, they would definitely be shocked. It was because this man in snow-white clothes was the School of Sword Arts Supreme Chief, the man who stood at the top of the Empire's Sword Arts. Standing behind the 2 of them was Peter from the Great Western Region Regional Academy, Hildebrand's follower who had been in hiding. He was also the conferred knight that Feng Xingjian had wanted to look for this time around. The one-eyed old man said, Supreme Chief, what do you think? This time around, Feng Xingjian has really been a great help in getting rid of all the factions in the Great Western region. The Supreme Chief did not say a word, but Peter grinned and said that Feng Xingjian thought that he was doing this secretly, but he didn't expect that we've long since seen through the information channels of his subordinates. Furthermore, he even took the initiative to reveal his dimensional storage equipment, which makes it convenient for our plan this time around to take in even more factions. The one-eyed old man smiled coldly and did not say a word. He was the previous governor of the BI's continent and also Hildebrand's grandfather. He was a top-notch level 29 expert and had been focusing on his cultivation for the past few years. Due to a fortuitous encounter, he had even managed to attain perfection in all 1,440 specialty seeds, possessing the abilities of a level 29 expert with the first tier of perfection and becoming a demigod. Although he was already at level 29 and had the ability to regenerate his physical body, he still wore an eye patch over one of his eyes. This made people curious as to what was hidden under the eye patch. Ever since he found out that Feng Xingjian was trying to find out about his grandson, Hildebrand, a murderous intent had arisen in his heart. When the first prince had laid out the trap and ordered him to carry it out, he had immediately agreed. That was right. The one-eyed old man had long since signed the Hell's Map. Otherwise, he would not have had the opportunity to attain perfection in his specialty seeds. The Supreme Chief said calmly, if it wasn't because the first prince had found out about Feng Xingjian's growth in strength through secret channels, and that this is the crucial moment in His Highness' plan, he wouldn't have set up this plan in such a thorough manner. Our time is running out. Today, the reason why we've set up the Death Dominion across the entire Dark Shadow Mountain and joined forces with the powers of the 3 of us is to capture Feng Xingjian in one fell swoop. There's no room for failure. As for taking in the factions in the Great Western region, it's just something we've done in passing. However, we must be careful. This guy has great talent, and his sword art cultivation is only slightly weaker than mine. We must be very careful when dealing with him. We mustn't make any mistakes." Hearing the Supreme Chief's words, Peter was stunned and thought, 3 great experts? They can't possibly be including me as well, right? Just as he was thinking about this, a series of laughter came from behind him. He turned his head and saw a man with a naked upper body, who looked like a big black bear, walking out. Seeing the man's identity, Peter's body trembled. It was because of the man's identity. To think that it's the Black Wings leader. The Black Wings leader had the abilities of the first echelon at level 29. Although he had yet to complete one tier of perfection, he was born with great strength. He had been fighting against several 100,000 wild beasts in the southern borders since young, and his body had been tempered greatly. He had once killed 2 level 29 ferocious beasts head-on, a monster known as the Darkness Demon Lord. Although he was not a demigod, his abilities were definitely not to be underestimated. Seeing the Darkness Demon Lord's appearance, Peter's expression changed, and he understood what was going on. So that's how it is. It's no wonder that the Black Wings acted so cooperatively today and even lured people over to the Ice Palace. So, the Darkness Demon Lord has also been taken in by the first prince a long time ago. That's why he intentionally made a move to incite a chaotic battle between the 3 factions, causing all the factions in the Great Western region to be thrown into chaos. He even treated his own subordinates and his own organization as cannon fodder, as expected of the Darkness Demon Lord. The Darkness Demon Lord said, "Everything has been prepared." The corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a brutal smile. "With the 10-directional Hell's flag that His Highness has bestowed upon us, the entire Dark Shadow Mountain is now in a state of death. In my opinion, we should just charge up and kill all of them. Why is there a need to wait here?" The Supreme Chief shook his head and said, "Don't underestimate Fong Xingjian. I've already observed him from afar. Right now, his cultivation is deep and unfathomable, and he's probably already a demigod. The Illumination Society and the Eternal Night Society have also accumulated their strength over the years. We can let them fight it out first while we wait for them to exhaust themselves." When Peter heard this, he started to observe a moment of silence for Fong Xingjian. Supreme Chief, the previous governor, 2 demigod experts, and the Darkness Demon Lord, who is an expert at the pinnacle of level 29. With the 3 of them ambushing him together, there's also the 10-directional Hell's flag that the first prince has bestowed upon us, as well as the Illumination Society and the Eternal Night Society targeting him. Even if that Fong Xingjian is a reincarnated god, he's dead for sure. Chapter 453. At the foot of the mountain, the people from the Black Wings were gathered together. On both sides of them were the people from the Illumination Society and the Eternal Night Society. Further away were the people from the other major sections. Due to the existence of the dimensional storage equipment and the fact that the Black Wings had to make the first move, countless cultivators had gathered here. The current leader of the Black Wings was the founder of the Black Wings, a middle-aged man with the nickname of the Black Wings Demon. Ever since the Darkness Demon Lord defeated him and snatched the position of the leader of the Black Wings, this level 28 middle-aged man had been the second in command of the Black Wings. The main forces of the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society were the Eternal Night Society's Night Eagle and the Illumination Society's Radiant Envoy. Although there were many people present, everyone knew that the Black Wings Demon, Night Eagle, and the Radiant Envoy would determine the outcome of the battle. The Black Wings Demon revealed a smirk and said eerily, "Haha, Eternal Night Society. The martial arts exchange this time around is organized by you guys. Now that things are in chaos, aren't you guys going to do something about it? The president will naturally be in charge of the overall situation. I'm only here to stop you guys from taking action." Night Eagle looked at the Black Wings Demon calmly and said, "Black Wings, both our clans are here. There's no way you can barge your way through. Give up." He. Black Wings smiled and shrugged. "The 3 of us are about the same in terms of abilities. There's no point in saying so much. In the end, aren't we still waiting for your president and our leader to make a move to determine the outcome of the battle? Moreover, Are you guys so confident about the situation at the Ice Palace? Don't let the dimensional storage equipment end up in our hands while you guys fight to the death with me. Just then, a black shadow suddenly appeared in the middle of the three of them. Then, thunderous sounds rang out crazily, as if there were a myriad of thunderclaps in the sky. It was Feng Xingjian who had appeared before the three of them. The radiant envoy frowned. Vicious Knight, why have you come here? You're talking about the people you sent to the Ice Palace? Feng Xingjian said calmly. I've killed everyone who spied on the Ice Palace. Where's your leader? Tell him to come out and see me. You must give my Ice Palace an explanation today. The expressions of Night Eagle and the Radiant Emissary changed slightly when they heard this. The people they sent tonight included their trusted aides. At this point, they also understood that Feng Xingjian was much more powerful than they had expected. Blackwing was extremely satisfied with Feng Xingjian's appearance. He took the initiative to provoke Vicious Knight. The reason why everyone is here today is because of the dimensional storage equipment on you. Your Ice Palace is just a third-rate sect. You won't be able to keep your spatial equipment. Keeping it in your hands will only lead to your death. You'd better hand it over as soon as possible. Blackwing's words were extremely blatant, causing Night Eagle and Light Envoy to frown. However, the other sects around them were thinking the same thing. There were even a few small sects with insufficient strength that shouted on the spot, wanting to fish in troubled waters. Yeah, it's not like your Ice Palace can use all the spatial equipment. Why don't you all take it out and use it together? Let's buy it together. Everyone can take turns using it. The others remained silent, waiting coldly to see how the Vicious Knight was going to deal with this. Feng Xingjian said calmly, It's not impossible if you guys want my spatial equipment. I'll be standing here today, and all of you can come at me. As long as anyone can defeat me, the spatial equipment will belong to him. Tyron grinned and said in the bangle, You're thinking of using your powers to suppress all the sects in the Great Western region? Feng Xingjian said, through information currents, Didn't you say that there isn't a single demigod who has attained perfection in the three great sects in the Great Western region? Then I'll use force to subdue them. That's just the simplest method. It's no wonder that you wanted to expose the fact that you have a spatial bangle. Did you do it on purpose? It doesn't matter if I did it on purpose or not. I've always done things without any inhibitions. If I need to use the gates of the netherworld, then I'll use it. There's no need to hold back. After Feng Xingjian said this, the countless people in the surroundings burst into an uproar. Many members of the various sects started shouting, as if they wanted to jump up one after another and fight it out with Feng Xingjian. To them, Feng Xingjian's words were too arrogant and did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy also frowned inwardly. They could not understand what the Vicious Knight was trying to do. Did he want to challenge all the factions in the Great Western region single-handedly? What kind of joke was this? However, the Blackwing's demon laughed inwardly. He had not expected Feng Xingjian to be so cooperative. However, Feng Xingjian paid no heed to everyone's thoughts and said once again, All right, don't all of you want my spatial equipment? Is there no one else coming up? A short moment later, a man who was covered in armor and looked like a small hill walked out. Each step he took caused the ground to tremble. It's Giant Elephant from the Steel Cavalry Association. The armor he's wearing weighs 10 tons, and it's all forged from a secret alloy. He doesn't rely on this for defense. Instead, he relies on it for training. Sigh, only a second transition expert can do this. It's said that after he stepped in a level 25 and condensed his specialty seeds, he has never taken off this set of armor. Boom, 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 boom. Footsteps rang out, and with each step he took, a deep footprint was left behind. A thick, buzzing voice rang out from under the armor. Steel Cavalry Association, attack. Without giving the other party a chance to finish his words, Feng Xingjian punched out across space, and with a loud boom that weighed over 10 tons, the giant elephant was sent flying. In midair, his alloy armor had completely disintegrated, turning into countless fragments that flew in the air. As for Giant Elephant himself, he fainted completely and fell to the ground. Seeing that a level 25 expert had been knocked out with a single punch, the entire place fell into silence. It was as if no one could accept that giant elephant had been killed instantly with a single punch. Only Feng Xingjian's voice was left ringing out slowly. "Those below level 25, don't come up and embarrass yourselves," Feng Xingjian said with a wave of his hand. "Is there anyone else who's interested in my dimensional storage equipment?" The entire place seemed to have fallen into an awkward silence, and no one dared to say another word. Even Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy's eyes were filled with astonishment. To kill Giant Elephant with a single punch, to instantly kill an expert who was known for his physical body cultivation. Even they would not be able to do something like this. The Black Wings demon, who was the only one who knew of Feng Xingjian's abilities and identity, laughed coldly inwardly. "Go on and fight, go on and fight. It'd be best if the leaders of the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society can all come out. All three of them will bash their brains out." At this moment, another tall and skinny man walked up to them. It was the leader of the Gale Express, Gale. It was said that this person's speed was extremely fast, and he had once crossed the entire Great Western region within 10 minutes. The Gale Express that he had set up was also the #1 influence in the Great Western region's civilian transportation business, monopolizing over 70% of the civilian transportation market in the Great Western region. Chapter 454. Gale is up as well. It's said that his speed is so fast that he can cross the Great Western region within 10 minutes. That's nothing. It's said that when he attacks at full power, his shadows will become blurry and surpass one's vision. It's impossible for people to see the shadows on the ground. Therefore, he has the nickname of Shadowless. Moreover, he's at level 26 and has already grasped the ability to attack physical particles. Even if he isn't a match for Feng Xingjian, he should be able to hang on for a period of time. We could take this opportunity to see what kind of trump cards Feng Xingjian has up his sleeves. Gale seemed to be a man of few words. He did not speak at all the moment he entered the arena. Instead, he moved his legs and moved at high speed. His body cut across the sky, bringing up many long air currents. His legs continued to cut across and step on the air, sending out layers and layers of ripples. It was as if he was stepping on water. Moreover, Gale continued to increase his speed. To him, the air was as viscous as glue, allowing him to easily step on the air and continue to increase his speed. The shadows on the ground connected together and became increasingly blurry. In the blink of an eye, no one could see them clearly. Gale's silhouette also formed many straight lines, cutting across the sky incessantly like several tens of lightning bolts. So fast, to think that Gale's cultivation has increased once again. Night Eagle's gaze was also slightly shaken. The speed that Gale was displaying right now was enough to pose a threat to him. On the battlefield, Gale's body emitted a tremendous amount of heat. His entire body was like an engine, propelling his body crazily, incessantly increasing his speed. He sensed that his speed was getting increasingly faster, and he sensed that the entire world was getting increasingly slower. It was as if the world had stopped. A sense of excitement surged through his entire body, making him feel as if he was the ruler of the entire world. This continued until a palm came descending from the sky. Just as he reached his highest speed, it came pressing down with an endless force. It was as if he was swatting a fly, smashing him into the ground with a loud boom, creating a huge crater. Everyone who was talking just now stopped talking and looked at this scene in disbelief. Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy also stared at Feng Xingjian, exclaiming inwardly, "When did the Great Western region have such a great expert? To think that the Vicious Knight's abilities have reached such a level. It's no wonder that he's so arrogant." Killing Mammoth with a single punch and knocking Gale unconscious with a single palm strike, Feng Xingjian's gaze swept across the entire arena. After a full 3 minutes, no one dared to go up on stage. It should be said that level 25 and level 26 powerhouses were the mainstays of most of the small sections. Now that they had been killed in an instant, who would be able to catch up? Everyone turned their gazes toward the direction of the Eternal Night Society, the Illumination Society, and the Black Wings, as if waiting for these three top-notch factions to make a move. Fang Xingjian also glanced at the Dark Wings and said indifferently, "Didn't you want my spatial equipment? Make your move." The Black Wings demon laughed and retreated, saying, "Haha, I'm not your match. Our Black Wings will give up on the spatial equipment this time." What? Hearing the Black Wings demon's words, everyone present was astonished once again. Their gazes toward Fang Xingjian were even more different now. To think that he could force the Black Wings, one of the three great factions in the Great Western region, to retreat. Was this Fang Xingjian really this powerful? However, Fang Xingjian waved his hand and said, "Of course, none of you are my match. However, you can come at me together. Night Eagle, Radiant Envoy, Black Wings Demon, I don't think that you guys will be convinced if we don't fight it out. Since that's the case, then come at me together." Night Eagle frowned, feeling very displeased with Fang Xingjian's arrogant attitude. He said, "Vicious Knight, it's true that you're stronger than us. I don't deny that we're not your match in a one-on-one fight. However, to think that you want the three of us to come at you together, aren't you being too arrogant?" The Radiant Envoy shook his head. He did not think that Fang Xingjian would be able to deal with the three of them single-handedly. However, Fang Xingjian smiled. "If you win against me, I'll give the dimensional storage equipment to the three of you. If you still don't make a move, you won't have another chance." If the three of them were to make a move, even if they won, it would be an unfair victory. However, this matter concerned the dimensional storage equipment. This caused Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy to hesitate. The two of them exchanged a glance, and Night Eagle walked out. "Since that's the case, then I'll be looking forward to your guidance." With that, he put out his palm, and the area within a range of 100 meters instantly turned into darkness. It was as if the entire world had sunk into endless darkness. With Fang Xingjian's heaven's perception, it was not just his vision that was affected. Even all light waves and sound waves had dissipated, and the entire space in his consciousness seemed to have sunk into eternal darkness. The moment Night Eagle made his move, he used the Eternal Night Society's ultimate killing technique, the Eternal Night Barrier. It was as if the entire world had sunk into eternal darkness, and a concept of the world sinking into a dark abyss was emitted, wiping out all of his opponent's sensory abilities. The Eternal Night Society's doctrine was that they believed that the entire world would eventually sink into the final darkness, and the Eternal Night Barrier was created based on this doctrine. Right now, Fang Xingjian seemed as if he really could not sense anything at all. He stood there in the darkness, not moving at all. As Night Eagle made his move, the Radiant Envoy also made his move. With a tap of his finger, light pierced through the darkness. It was as if the world had just been created, and the first ray of light pierced through the sky, bringing hope, life, and a new world. The light sword pierced through the sky, bringing with it the heaviness of opening up a new world. It slashed out toward Fang Xingjian's position. Wherever the light sword passed by, there would be a series of distortions and disorder, as if many new worlds were being born. This world creation light sword was the Illumination Society's ultimate killing technique. It was taken from the Illumination Society's objective of the first ray of light to create a world. It brought with it the heaviness of splitting the world and creating a new world, and specialized in crushing and shattering various physical particles. Right now, this sword slashed out toward the seemingly defenseless Fang Xingjian. No one had expected that the Illumination Society and the Eternal Night Society, two factions that seemed to be incompatible with each other, would have such a terrifying battle prowess when they joined hands with their killing techniques. Just as the light sword was about to slash down on Fang Xingjian's body, a layer of black light appeared on Fang Xingjian's body. The Universal Truth Longsword was activated, in a state of being the one and only sword into the sky, mercilessly pushing away the Eternal Night Barrier's interference. Then the prodigious demolition sword physique was activated, and Fang Xingjian punched out, colliding fiercely with the world creation light sword. Under the Radiant Envoy's disbelieving gaze, the light sword shattered inch by inch and completely disintegrated. Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy turned pale with fright. Their auras surged, and they were about to make another move. Relying on his level 40 sword arts, Fang Xingjian broke through the duo's killing moves at one go. His body swayed slightly, and then he was so fast that it was as if he had transformed into two people. Each of them punched out toward Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy. Chapter 455. Faced with Fang Xingjian's punch, which was like a celestial flying from beyond the heavens, Night Eagle's powers surged throughout his body. His face flushed red, and the sounds of countless worlds exploding rang out. It was as if countless small worlds were shattering in his body. He unleashed the power of over 100,000 physical particles, and black shock waves exploded from his palms, encompassing toward Fang Xingjian. However, he was still smashed by Fang Xingjian's punch. Night Eagle was sent flying out, colliding into a mountain over 10 kilometers away with a boom, and fainted completely. The Radiant Envoy was not in a much better state either. The layers of light shields were shattered by Fang Xingjian's punch. Fang Xingjian then pressed down with his fist, piercing through the ground and dashing into the depths of the earth like a longsword. The Ice Palace's great priestess and saint had just arrived at the scene when they saw this astonishing scene. Like everyone else, they opened their eyes wide in disbelief. Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy, two veteran experts from the Illumination Society and the Eternal Night Society, had been defeated just like that. Moreover, the two of them had joined forces. Everyone looked at Fang Xingjian, who was completely unscathed, as if he had not fought at all. All of them realized one thing. This vicious knight's name was probably going to shake the great western region and become a top-notch expert of the new generation. The Ice Palace's saint looked at the young man on the platform in a daze, thinking in disbelief, to think that even Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy are no match for him. Fang Xingjian, is this what you're relying on to do things without any reservations? Absolute power brings about absolute confidence. The Black Wings demon had not made a move from the beginning to the end. He continued to wear a confident smile as he looked at Fang Xingjian, who was stunned, and thought, "Your subordinate has been defeated like this. Even if it's for the sake of protecting the faction's dignity, the two of you should still make a move." Sensing that everything was going according to plan, the Black Wings demon felt increasingly exhilarated. This Fang Xingjian is really a good sword. At the next moment, the entire sky darkened. Everyone lifted their heads and saw that a black sun had risen in the western sky. It engulfed all the light in the world, as if wanting to bring eternal darkness to the mortal world. It's the Eternal Night Society's Yi Huang. Is Yi Huang also going to make a move? That's a level 29 top-notch expert. I wonder if the Vicious Knight will be able to block it. Seeing Yi Huang's appearance, the people from the Eternal Night Society, who were initially extremely depressed, immediately raised their heads. Yi Huang, who had dominated the great western region for several decades and had never been defeated after reaching level 29, was the spiritual pillar of the entire Eternal Night Society. It could be said that even if the entire Eternal Night Society were to be wiped out, as long as Yi Huang was still alive, the Eternal Night Society would be able to make a comeback at any time. Just as the Night Emperor appeared, a bright light rose from the east, illuminating the originally darkening night sky. The light seemed to contain endless hope, the aura of life, and boundless weight. The moment Yi Huang appeared, the president of the Illuminati appeared as well. Both Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's president are here. Are they going to take action as well? Of course. The Vicious Knight single-handedly challenged the Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy today. If they don't make a move, their reputation will be ruined, and they'll be treated as cowards. What a pity, what a pity. Although that Vicious Knight is powerful, how can he be a match for Yi Huang and the others? After all, Yi Huang and the others are experts who have been at level 29 for many years. That Vicious Knight is probably not a match for them. No one would think that the Vicious Knight, who had appeared out of nowhere, would be a match for Yi Huang and the Illuminati Society's president. It was because the Vicious Knight's battle achievements were to defeat the Night Eagle and the Radiant Envoy. On the other hand, Yi Huang and the Illuminati Society's president's prowess had been built up through repeated victories over several decades. They were experts who were revered by countless people in the Great Western region. The Ice Palace's saint also shook her head. So what if you're extremely powerful? It's a pity that you don't know how to control yourself. You've offended the two strongest people in the Great Western region. No matter how talented you are, this is the end of it. In the sky, Yi Huang's voice rang out. Right, long time no see. I didn't expect that we'd be able to meet again in this lifetime. Right was the name of the Illuminati Society's president. Hearing Yi Huang's words, the Illuminati Society's president sighed and said, "Light and darkness are never compatible." I also didn't expect that there would be a time when we would appear in the sky together. Yi Huang, it's been many years since we last met. Let's have a good spar later. Let me see how much your eternal night barrier has improved. Yi Huang let out a soft snort and said, "You wish to challenge me? Do you feel that your old bones won't be able to hold on much longer and want to risk your life to seriously injure me so that the Illuminati can have a chance of survival?" The Illuminati Society's president said calmly, "Light will never be extinguished. Even if I die, the Illuminati will continue to exist forever." Haven't you heard of this saying before? Only when there's light will there be darkness. Without light, darkness will be meaningless. Light is only temporary. Lift your head and look at the starry sky. Darkness is the main theme of the entire world. Seeing that the two of them were communicating while ignoring him, Fang Xingjian shook his head impatiently and said, "Hey, when are the two of you going to continue talking? If you want to fight, then fight. If not, then scram." Hearing Fang Xingjian's words, both Yi Huang and the Illuminati Society's president were stunned. It was as if they had not expected that someone would treat them so rudely. Yi Huang could not help but laugh. Right, it seems that it's been too long since we've made a move. Some young people have already forgotten about what happened back then. The Illuminati Society's president threw an indifferent glance at Fang Xingjian as if he was looking at a bug. Are you going to make a move, or should I? Of course, it was impossible for him to join forces with Yi Huang to fight against Fang Xingjian. Yi Huang said calmly, "Let me do it. After I deal with it, we'll have a good chat." He intentionally placed emphasis on the word chat. It was clear that this was not an ordinary chat. At the next moment, a huge pitch-black palm, formed from pure darkness, descended from the sky. Wherever it passed by, all sensory abilities would be rendered ineffective. It slapped out toward where Fang Xingjian was located as if it was completely formless. As it was not an all-out attack, this attack, which was formless and absorbed all light and sound waves, slapped onto Fang Xingjian's body directly. A tremendous rumble rang out, and Fang Xingjian was sent smashing into the mountain like a needle. It was because the toughness of Fang Xingjian's body was far too high that he had been slapped down by the palm, which was why there was such an effect of a needle piercing into the ground. After slapping down Fang Xingjian, Yi Huang did not even throw a glance at him. He just said to Wright, "All right, you can choose the place." However, at the next moment, a black shadow had already appeared behind him. It was Fang Xingjian, who had been smashed down by him. To think that Fang Xingjian had suddenly appeared behind him. "You can get down first." What? A hint of astonishment appeared on Yi Huang's face. However, at the next moment, his battle instincts were activated. Eternal Night Barrier. Ineffective. Black shock waves. Dissipated with a single slap. Over 100 weapons materialized from black shadows. Black Knight, Divine Weapon Rain. They were blocked by Fang Xingjian's body and bounced off. Over 10 superior divine weapons, each bringing along the powers of wind, rain, thunder, lightning, and flames, smashed out. All of them were shattered by a single punch from Fang Xingjian. A pure black long saber darted out. It was the Eternal Night Society's legacy divine weapon, Night Advent. It was a level 29 superior divine weapon that had been reinforced by countless generations of experts. However, right now, it was struck by a single finger from Fang Xingjian, causing the long saber to be unable to advance any further. Fang Xingjian's 5 layers of defense were all easily broken through. At the next moment, under Yi Huang's astonished gaze, a huge and substantial palm filled with endless power pressed down on his head. With a tremendous force that could not be fended off or resisted, Yi Huang was sent smashing down toward the ground like a meteor. Chapter 456. In that instant, the entire world trembled. Large areas of mountains were smashed open, and everyone present had their mouths agape as their eyes popped out. They looked at this scene as if they were looking at a miracle. This was especially so when the smoke and dust dissipated and everyone saw that Fang Xingjian was pressing down on Yi Huang's head with one hand and holding on a Nightfall's longsword with the other, sitting steadily on the unconscious Yi Huang. Everyone was so shocked that their minds went blank. Yi Huang, a great expert who had dominated the great western region for several decades and had never been defeated after reaching level 29, had lost just like that. However, the situation had far surpassed their imaginations. At the instant Yi Huang was defeated, the Illumination Society's chief made a move. To think that he managed to defeat Yi Huang in one go, what a vicious night. However, Yi Huang has been cultivating hard for many years. Although he has yet to become a demigod, his abilities are still not to be underestimated. Even if he managed to defeat Yi Huang, he must have depleted a tremendous amount of stamina and vitality. This is a good opportunity for me. A series of thoughts flashed through his mind like a spark. Simultaneously, the radiant longsword in his hand pierced through the air, bringing with it the heaviness of world creation as it pierced toward the back of Fang Xingjian's head. Seeing how Fang Xingjian did not dodge, the Illumination Society's chief felt assured. As expected, he cannot even dodge now. He had once used a world creation light sword to level a mountain range. As long as he was hit head-on, he had the confidence to kill Fang Xingjian with a single move. However, under his astonished gaze, the back of Fang Xingjian's head was struck by the world creation light sword. Amidst a shocking collision sound, Fang Xingjian staggered from the impact and retreated a few kilometers at a rapid speed before standing up unscathed. The light sword in the Illumination Society's chief's hand shattered inch by inch, scattering into the air. Fang Xingjian shook his head and stood up. His body was extremely tough and was at the level of a level 29 superior divine weapon. Therefore, he could take on this attack head-on. However, his physical strength was unable to fend off the power of the world creation light sword, which was why he had been sent flying. At this moment, the Illumination Society's chief's expression was extremely grim. With a wave of his hand, a myriad of light swords responded. It was as if there was a meteor shower in the sky, and several tens of hundreds of world creation light swords blasted toward Fang Xingjian. Looking at the world creation light swords that were coming down like a meteor shower, Fang Xingjian put his palms together and activated the Zenith light sword formation. 6 light spots that were like brilliant suns rose up behind Fang Xingjian, turning into countless light swords that shot out toward the Illumination Society's chief. Streams of world creation light swords struck Fang Xingjian's body, sending him flying in all directions and unable to stop. Simultaneously, the Zenith light sword formation's light swords, which had a high temperature of several 10,000 degrees, swept across the Illumination Society's chief's body. However, they were all blocked and even absorbed by his light shield. Vicious night, to think of using light swords to deal with me. Should I say that you're naive or foolish? At this point, Fang Xingjian calmed down and rejoiced that his estimations had been right. The other party had depleted too much of his physical strength and vital qis in order to defeat Yi Huang and was at his weakest. Fang Xingjian had made the right move. On Fang Xingjian's side, Tyrant, who was in his bangle, grinned and said, "How is it? Do you want me to use the gates of the Netherworld? An attack like this can be easily dealt with using the gates of the Netherworld. There's no need for that. My sword arts are sufficient to deal with everything." Fang Xingjian, who had been sent flying into midair, suddenly let out an explosive bellow and activated the universal truth longsword, repelling all the world creation light swords. Many light pillars stopped 3 meters away from him, trembling incessantly and getting closer inch by inch. It was as if they were going to break through Fang Xingjian's universal truth longsword at the next moment and strike his body. However, with this delay, Fang Xingjian's hand reached out toward his back. Strange kacha-kacha sounds rang out, and under everyone's astonished gazes, Fang Xingjian pulled out his spine. His spine was as white as jade, and it was completely straight as if it was a long sword made of jade. This was the first time Fang Xingjian had used his spine long sword ever since he had completed cultivating the white bone divine weapon, and his physical body's toughness had reached level 29. This also showed that the Illumination Society's chief's abilities were indeed extraordinary. As this spine was pulled out, Fang Xingjian also activated the Heaven's Volition Sword intent for 1 second. An aura that was completely different from when he had been fighting earlier soared into the air, and his eyes were filled with sword light, shooting out explosively. Right now, how could the sword-wielding Fang Xingjian be mentioned in the same breath as the Fang Xingjian who had been fighting with his fists? With a dash, Fang Xingjian shot out toward the Illumination Society's chief. Streams of world creation light swords swept out, but they were all destroyed and repelled by Fang Xingjian, who was holding a long sword in his hand, together with the prodigious demolition sword physique and the universal truth longsword. They turned into hints of light particles and dissipated in midair. Swoosh, 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 swoosh sounds rang out incessantly, and Fang Xingjian crossed several kilometers of the sky. Wherever he passed by, over 100 light swords would be destroyed by him. Wherever the long sword passed by, there was nothing it could not break. At the next moment, the white spine swept out toward the chest of the Illumination Society's chief, while bringing along a faint fog. Although he did not know why Fang Xingjian had suddenly unleashed such a powerful battle prowess, the Illumination Society's chief could no longer care so much. Over 800 specialty seeds self-detonated, over 10 superior divine weapons exploded, and secret arts were activated. Over 300,000 physical particles on the Illumination Society's chief's body seemed to have been ignited, emitting a brilliant glow. All of the powers gathered together and entered the mirror in the hands of the Illumination Society's chief. The mirror was crystal clear, emitting a milky white glow. It was as if it was the first ray of light that had been born when the world had been created. It was the level 29 superior divine weapon that had been passed down through the generations of the Illumination Society, the heaven-splitting mirror. At this moment, the Illumination Society's chief was really going all out. Under the reinforcement of endless powers, the vast white light burst out explosively into a light pillar with a diameter of 10 meters. Wherever the light pillar passed by, the space would tremble, and all physical matter would be shattered into dust. The Illumination Society's doctrine was that the first ray of light had opened up the world and created the world. However, there was another hidden meaning. It was that in the end, the world would also be destroyed by the last ray of light, and then be created anew. The world would then sink into the cycle of darkness and light time and time again. The creation divine light unleashed by the heaven-splitting mirror could only be performed once a year. However, once it was performed, its prowess would be sufficient to shatter a level 29 superior divine weapon. However, it was still useless. The difference between a demigod and a non-demigod was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Moreover, right now, Fang Xingjian had already drawn out his spine longsword and activated the Heaven's Volition Sword intent. Fang Xingjian dashed into the light pillar and swept out with his longsword. Under the reinforcement of the Heaven's Volition Sword intent, the prodigious demolition sword physique and the universal truth longsword became a perfect combination. They slashed through the electromagnetic waves and light, splitting the light pillar into two and arriving before the Illumination Society's chief. With the reinforcement from the Heaven's Volition Sword intent, Fang Xingjian's sword arts level was raised to another level. At the next moment, under the astonished gaze of the Illumination Society's chief, the long sword pierced through the heaven-splitting mirror, turning it into dust. The sword sheath struck the Illumination Society's chief heavily, causing him to spurt out blood and retreat in retreat. However, due to the existence of the heaven-splitting mirror, Feng Xingjian's Heaven's Volition sword intent had been depleted for an additional 2 seconds. He had used up a total of 3 seconds. Taking into account his potential, he still had 17 seconds left. The Illumination Society's chief's last bit of power was completely depleted, and he plunged toward the ground, sending up a great amount of dust. Who else? Feng Xingjian held onto his long sword and stood in midair, sweeping his gaze across everyone. Feng Xingjian's voice was like thunder, seething out like electricity, clearing away all the cloud layers within a range of 10 lis. Chapter 457. Seeing how easily Feng Xingjian defeated Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief, and how his gaze swept through the entire place, no one dared to reply. Even Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief, who had been undefeated in the Great Western Region's factions for several decades, had been easily defeated. Who else would dare to stand out? Who else would dare to fight against the vicious knight? The people from the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society seemed as if their worldview had collapsed as they surrounded their leaders. As for the Black Wings and the other factions, they were all silent, as if they had turned mute. Some of the more courageous people still wanted to say something, but when Feng Xingjian's gaze swept over, they felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over them. Killing intent seeped out from their bodies. Coupled with the fact that Feng Xingjian had just defeated Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief, they did not even dare to make a sound. The Ice Palace's great priestess looked at Feng Xingjian and sighed inwardly. I've already tried my best to overestimate Feng Xingjian's abilities, but I've still underestimated him. His battle prowess is much stronger than I imagined, especially that sword technique at the end which slashes through light rays. It's really amazing, turning the impossible into the possible. The Ice Palace's saint was also looking at Feng Xingjian. Her eyes were filled with astonishment and bitterness. Feng Xingjian has only been in the second transition for slightly over half a year, right? To think that his abilities have already reached such a level. To think that I thought that he was going to fall here today. So Master was right. Was it because my judgment was too poor and shallow? The scene of Feng Xingjian defeating Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief was too astonishing. More than 99% of the people present were as quiet as cicadas in winter, all of them feeling convinced. Many people understood that from today onward, a new legend was about to be born. The name of the Ice Palace's vicious knight was about to spread throughout the entire Great Western region. Feng Xingjian then turned his gaze toward the Illumination Society. A group of people surrounded the unconscious Illumination Society's chief, and Feng Xingjian said calmly, "What else does the Illumination Society have to say? If you're still unconvinced, I'm right here. You can come and challenge me anytime. There are no restrictions on the number of people, abilities, or weapons." An old man stood up with his back straight. He looked at Feng Xingjian with a face filled with grief and said, "From today onward, our Illumination Society will no longer have any designs on your equipment. From today onward, the Illumination Society will no longer be enemies with the Ice Palace." Feng Xingjian then looked at the people from the Eternal Night Society and asked, "What about you guys?" A middle-aged man from the Eternal Night Society stood up, waved his hand, and said with a bleak expression, "From today onward, wherever the Ice Palace is, our Eternal Night Society will naturally keep a distance." Amongst the three great factions, both the Eternal Night Society and the Illumination Society had been suppressed by Feng Xingjian single-handedly. Everyone's gazes instantly turned toward the Black Wings. The Xingjian looked at Feng Xingjian and Black Xingjian and revealed a strange smile. "Feng Xingjian, do you really think that the outcome has been decided?" At the next moment, a strange change took place. The entire Dark Shadow Mountain was suddenly filled with the smell of sulfur and lava. Countless crimson-red flames surrounded the dark shadow mountain, as if a huge cover had encompassed the entire mountain range. In particular, in the air, there were streaks of gray mist dancing wildly everywhere, and their mouths were constantly emitting heart-wrenching howls. Sulfur, lava, and things that looked like spirits filled the sky. Under everyone's astonished gazes, it was as if they had suddenly arrived in hell from a mortal world. In the sky, 3 silhouettes came from 3 different directions. They were the one-eyed old man, the School of Sword Art's supreme chief, and the darkness demon lord from the Dark Wings. Feng Xingjian frowned as he looked at the 3 of them and asked loudly, "And who are you guys?" "Feng Xingjian, it's true that you have great talent. To think that you've reached level 29 in just over half a year, even attaining 1 tier of perfection and becoming a demigod." The white-haired, white-eyed, and white-clothed Supreme Chief looked at Feng Xingjian and said calmly, "But today, with the 3 of us joining forces and using the 10 Directional Hell's flag to set up the Death Dominion, you'll definitely die." He then sighed, "It's a pity, a pity. A young genius is about to fall here." The one-eyed old man said, "Feng Xingjian, if you're willing to give up on resisting, surrender, and sign the Hell's map, we can let you off." The Darkness Demon Lord grinned and said, "What's there to say? Let me tear him apart." Feng Xingjian did not say anything. He only took in a deep breath, trying his best to recover from the damage and depletion in his body. In his consciousness, Tyrant shouted, "Damn it! That one-eyed old man is from the BI's continent's previous school, and that man is the Darkness Demon Lord. The 2 of them have nothing to do with each other, but that guy in the middle is the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief, Hung Tianxiao." "The School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief? Is he very powerful?" "He's not just powerful. He has 2 tiers of perfection in both his body's toughness and specialty seeds. He's a solid demigod expert. Moreover, his sword arts cultivation is probably not inferior to yours. This is very terrifying. It means that the 2 of you have about the same level of toughness, but his specialties have reached perfection. His agility, strength, and explosive force are all above yours. Don't engage in close combat with him." Tyrant frowned, "And that 10 Directional Hell's flag should be a divine weapon from the ancient path of hell. They've set up this Death Dominion. I wonder how powerful it is." Feng Xingjian listened and nodded to himself. The vital energy and blood in his body continued to circulate, relaxing the fatigue from the consecutive battles. The ether organs in his lungs continued to absorb and release energy, replenishing the depletion from earlier. At the same time, since the other party had already exposed his identity, he could not be bothered to continue hiding. He activated his bones, muscles, returning to his original appearance. The people below the stage looked at the scene before them with different thoughts in their minds. Occasionally, they would let out gasps of astonishment. This was especially so when the few of them had called out Feng Xingjian's name, and when Feng Xingjian had returned to his original appearance. Everyone gasped in astonishment. "It's Feng Xingjian? That genius-conferred knight from the Great Western region? The one who created the rebirth sword technique? Feng Xingjian? So it's him. But didn't he just transition half a year ago? To think that he defeated Yi Huang and the Illumination Society? His body's toughness has reached perfection, and he has become a demigod? How is this possible?" When Feng Xingjian revealed his original appearance, everyone felt that it was even more unbelievable. Who would have believed that the person who had defeated Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief was a young man who was only 18 or 19 years old? Such talent and abilities were really hard to imagine. Usually, they would not believe it. However, the truth was right before their eyes, and they had no choice but to believe it. Simultaneously, the identities of the 3 people in the sky were gradually recognized. "That's the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief. That old man looks so familiar. I remember now. He's the previous governor of the BI's continent. And the Darkness Demon Lord from the Black Wings. To think that they've joined forces." Chapter 458. As the three people in the sky were recognized one after another, cries of astonishment rang out from the crowd. The darkness demon lord, the one-eyed old man, and the school of sword art's supreme chief's abilities and reputation were all too astonishing. This was especially so for the school of sword art's supreme chief. His name shook the entire empire, and he was a king-level character in the empire's sword arts domain. It was said that no one below the divine level could surpass him in terms of sword arts. Simultaneously, Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief, who had fainted earlier, also woke up. After all, there were second transition level 29 experts at the body regeneration realm, and they had strong vitality. Although their battle prowess was greatly damaged, it was not a problem for them to wake up. The two of them looked at the situation in the sky with grim countenances. The current situation was too disadvantageous to them. Although they did not know what the three people in the sky were planning, just by thinking about the ambush they had set up, they knew that it was definitely not something good. Moreover, both Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief had suffered great damage in their battle with Feng Xingjian. This made them feel even more insecure. The one-eyed old man looked at the many factions below the stage and sent out information currents from his martial will. His voice rang out in everyone's minds. He said, "We're under the first prince. Today we're not only here to subdue Feng Xingjian, but also the many factions in the Great Western region. Today, you only have one choice, and that is to submit to the first prince and become a part of the empire's power. Those who are unwilling will only face death." Hearing the one-eyed old man's words, the countenances of everyone present changed. The countenances of Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief turned even more grim. Even if they were at their peak, it would be impossible for them to defeat a demigod like the Supreme Chief, let alone now when they were seriously injured. The countenances of the other factions were also grim. With the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief around, there was also the previous governor, the Darkness Demon Lord, and they had the first prince, a character who could attain the divine level at any moment, backing them up. Who would dare to be impudent? In the direction of the Black Wings demon, who was the leader, looked at everyone's countenances with amusement. From the beginning to the end, everything had been within the first prince's plan. As someone who knew the entire plan, he looked at this scene and was filled with delight as the mastermind. Just like that, going with the flow, supporting the strongest, and becoming the strongest force had always been his favorite thing to do. Therefore, at this moment, he was the first to step out and say, "The first prince is destined by the heavens, a sage that has never been seen before throughout the ages, and the future princess. We, the Black Wings, will naturally all join the first prince." Although the Darkness Demon Lord had appeared in the sky, and everyone had expected this to happen, when they saw the Black Wings truly joining the first prince's side, their countenances turned even more grim. Not long after, 5 or 6 small factions began to pledge their loyalty to the first prince, and the situation became more and more disadvantageous. Yi Huang let out a cold snort, looked in the direction of the Black Wings demon, and said, "Lackey, the first prince is militaristic, and he levies and levies unscrupulously. If you follow him, you won't have a good ending. In the end, you will all be cannon fodder. Moreover, after joining the Empire, all the killing techniques and secret arts would eventually be incorporated into the Empire. All the disciples and elders would be divided into various departments, and the extinction of the factions would only be a matter of time. Are you so willing to see the inheritance end in your own hands?" The Illumination Society's chief also said, "Isn't the situation today obvious? It's the first prince who's incessantly stirring up conflict between us and Feng Xingjian, reaping the spoils from the sidelines. Yet you guys still want to join him?" The Black Wings demon smiled and said, "To think that you guys have been around for so many years. Don't you think that what you're saying is very childish? Whoever doesn't pledge loyalty to the first prince today will have to die. Yi Huang, chief, do the two of you want to drag the entire faction down with you to the grave?" Yi Huang and the Illumination Society's chief instantly fell silent. The difference in strength and the terror of being caught between life and death. These are the greatest problems right now. However, a short moment later, Yi Huang stood up, laughed out loud, and said, "The Eternal Night Society will eventually descend upon the mortal world, and everything in the world will eventually decay and die in the darkness. Our Eternal Night Society has never feared death." As he spoke, Yi Huang's entire body was filled with black aura. Compared to the Illumination Society's chief who had self-detonated his specialties and activated his secret arts, he had only been seriously injured by Fang Xingjian and had lost all of his divine weapons. Now that he had regained consciousness, he still had about 50% of his battle prowess. His entire body was encompassed by black aura, evading all senses. It was as if his physical body had entered an alternate dimension. With a dash, he dashed out toward the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief, who was in the sky. Everyone watched as Yi Huang suddenly disappeared. Then, accompanied by a stream of sword light, he appeared before the Supreme Chief. The Supreme Chief did not move his limbs, but the endless stream of sword light slashed onto Yi Huang's body. Not only was he slashed out from the Eternal Night Barrier, but he was also slashed until his entire body was covered in blood. He was unable to get close to the Supreme Chief. With a furious bellow, the black aura on Yi Huang's body became even denser. He exuded an extremely tragic and deep aura, and he no longer cared about the incoming sword light. Instead, he charged out toward the Supreme Chief with an indomitable will, giving up on defense completely. Endless black aura smashed out with the intent to engulf the world and the sun. The Eternal Night Society's highest technique was the Great Sun Devouring. It was a fist technique that engulfed sunlight and brought the world into eternal darkness. With a single punch, the darkness would engulf all of the opponent's senses and wave attacks. It could even seal the ether particles in the opponent's body, turning the opponent from a godlike expert into a mortal. Earlier on, Fang Xingjian's attack had been too sudden, and Yi Huang had not been able to unleash his full power in time. However, at this moment, Yi Huang had unleashed all of his potential. This Great Sun Devouring could be said to have incorporated all of the profoundness of his martial arts. However, when faced with the Eternal Night Society's most profound fist technique, the Supreme Chief did not move at all. Streams of sword light danced like silver snakes, and amidst the splattering of blood, Yi Huang's body was disintegrated inch by inch. In the end, only a pitch-black fist reached 3 meters before the Supreme Chief, but it was still turned into dust by the myriad of sword light. A level 29 powerhouse of this generation, with boundless solemnity and silence, disappeared from the world forever. Master, Lord Yi Huang, Lord Yi Huang. In that instant, the entire Eternal Night Society was wailing. Some people cried and knelt down, while others screamed agonizingly and charged toward the Supreme Chief, displaying all sorts of attacks. This time around, it was the Darkness Demon Lord who let out a cold laugh. Impudent! With a wave of his hand, a great flag filled with lava, sulfur, and a myriad of vengeful thoughts appeared behind him. At the next moment, streams of gray fog pounced toward the people of the Eternal Night Society who were resisting like vengeful spirits. Ordinary apprentices were turned into dried corpses with just a light touch. First transition experts were able to hold on for a few more hits, but they too turned into dried corpses after a short while. Second transition experts held on for the longest. However, as more and more vengeful spirits pounced toward them, their movements became increasingly stiff. In the end, they stopped moving and their bodies started to decay. Gray fog would also be emitted from the corpses of all those who were killed, joining the great army of vengeful spirits in the sky. The Darkness Demon Lord smiled and said, "The 10-directional Hell's Flag is a level 29 superior divine weapon that was forged after several decades of conquering the world and killing over 500,000 people. Once the 10-directional Hell's Flag is used to set up the Death Dominion, it will be able to trigger the vengeful spirits, the remnant consciousness, and information of the deceased to attack. This kind of attack is formless and can only be resisted with one's will. Once one's will is insufficient, one will become one of the vengeful spirits." Unknowingly, over 500,000 vengeful spirits had filled up the entire sky above the dark shadow mountain. The tremendous amount of souls let out soundless cries. Just by standing below them, one would have to endure the constant impact of their will. All the wild knights who were below the second transition all fell, unable to resist at all. Even second transition experts felt endless terror descend from the sky. They felt their limbs turn cold and their bodies turn numb. Within the death dominion set up by the 10-directional Hell's flag, all the experts below the second transition lost their battle prowess. Second transition experts were weakened by over 20%. As expected of something that the first prince had spent decades of hard work to achieve. Everyone could only watch as the people from the Eternal Night Society were killed one by one. Looking at the increasing number of souls in the sky, a deep sense of despair shrouded their hearts. The Black Wings demon looked at the Illumination Society's chief and asked, "How is it? Is the Illumination Society going to resist to the end as well?" The Illumination Society's chief looked at the people from the Eternal Night Society who had fallen one by one. He closed his eyes, let out a deep breath, and said, "The Illumination Society has surrendered." "Chief, you mustn't surrender, Chief." Looking at the Illumination Society surging forth, the Black Wings demon laughed out loud. "You're smarter, unlike the bunch of fools from the Eternal Night Society who are sending themselves to their death for nothing. You guys should know how difficult it is for a cultivator to cultivate to the second transition. If you were to send yourself to your deaths in such a situation, wasting several decades of hard work, then that would be true foolishness. With the annihilation of the Eternal Night Society and the surrender of the Illumination Society, the eyes of the many factions present revealed expressions of despair. Looking at this scene with satisfaction, the Black Wings demon looked at Feng Xingjian and asked, "Feng Xingjian, we know that you're making use of your time to recover. But even if we give you time to recover, what can you do? Let us ask you one more time. Are you going to surrender?" Chapter 459. Hearing the Black Wings demon's question, everyone's gazes turned toward Feng Xingjian. Countless gazes gathered together, exuding a seemingly material pressure. There was hope, despair, anticipation, and cold smiles. Everyone was waiting for Feng Xingjian's answer. Everyone knew that under such circumstances, even Feng Xingjian would not be able to win against the three experts above him. However, when they thought of Feng Xingjian's previous performances, they seemed to be anticipating something in the depths of their hearts. Just then, Feng Xingjian took in a deep breath and opened his eyes, looking as determined as before. Feng Xingjian's empty left hand pierced into his abdomen with a swoosh, grabbing onto the longest rib and pulling it out inch by inch. With the white bone longsword in his right hand and the white bone shortsword in his left hand, Feng Xingjian's entire body emitted overwhelming sword intents. He tightened his grip on the white bone longsword, looked at the Black Wings demon, and then lifted his head to look at the three experts in the sky. He said coldly, "Hung Tianxiao, today I'll first kill this lackey of yours. Then I'll kill the three of you one by one. If you guys can stop me, then go ahead and try." As he spoke, he moved with a flash, and the two swords in his hands brought about a myriad of sword shadows, attacking toward the Black Wings demon. Faced with the three experts' joint attacks and the 10-directional Hell's Flag's ambush, just when everyone thought that Feng Xingjian would surrender, not only did he not surrender, but he even took the initiative to attack, wanting to kill one of them first. At the instant when Feng Xingjian attacked, an enraged martial will swept across the entire place, and a furious voice exploded in everyone's minds. "How dare you!" Amidst the furious bellow of his martial will, the one-eyed old man dashed out fiercely. The 1,440 specialty seeds on his body exploded, and countless powers howled in his body. It was as if there were several tens of thousands of primordial, huge dragons galloping in his body. At this moment, his physical strength had reached an extreme level below the divine level. Attaining perfection in one's body's toughness would increase one's defense, while attaining perfection in one's specialty seeds would increase one's various attributes. Attaining perfection in one's physical particles would increase the maximum value of one's energy outburst, increasing the prowess of various killing techniques such as flames, lightning, light, and darkness. Right now, the one-eyed old man's 1,440 specialty seeds had reached perfection. At this moment, the physical attributes he unleashed had completely surpassed that of Feng Xingjian's. Before Feng Xingjian's swords could pierce through the black-robed, fiendish demon, he threw a punch at Feng Xingjian's back. Before the force of the punch arrived, a terrifying force had already pierced through the air layer by layer. At the same time, it was accompanied by an artistic conception that made it seem as if all things would perish and gods and demons would weep blood. It caused Feng Xingjian to feel a tightness in his chest. The punch struck out. While the force of the force was violent, it also brought along an artistic conception that made all things would perish and gods and demons weep blood. It nurtured an aura that made it seem as if it would kill all gods and Buddhas who stood in its way. This was the one-eyed old man's self-created killing technique, Annihilation Fist. Simultaneously, at the moment of life and death, the Black Wings demon let out a strange cry and unleashed his full power. He was not a match for Feng Xingjian. However, his speed was far too slow when compared to the one-eyed old man and Feng Xingjian. The one-eyed old man's muscles and vital energy and blood had just started to move when the one-eyed old man's punch had already landed fiercely on Feng Xingjian's back. What caused the one-eyed old man to miscalculate was that Feng Xingjian did not even try to block or dodge, taking on his punch head-on. Rumbling sounds rang out from Feng Xingjian's body. His specialty seeds had attained perfection, and his top-notch physical strength, which was below the divine level, smashed onto his back without any reservations. Even though it had been weakened by the heavenly abyss annihilation armor, and even though he had the toughness of a level 29 divine weapon, Feng Xingjian, who had attained perfection in his toughness, still felt waves of intense pain coming from his internal organs. It was as if his body was going to split apart. However, it was precisely because he had taken on the one-eyed old man's punch head-on that Feng Xingjian managed to grab the opportunity to attack the Black Wings demon. Moreover, when the one-eyed old man's power landed on his body, it was as if his charging speed had increased once again. The powers of the two of them gathered together, causing Feng Xingjian to shoot out toward the Black Wings demon like a meteor. The Black Wings demon did not have the time to do anything. The two white bone long swords in Feng Xingjian's hands had already slashed past his head and chest respectively. Boom, boom, boom. Under the high-speed impact, the Black Wings demon's head was directly blasted apart by the sword. His chest was also smashed into mush, and he could not be more dead. Feng Xingjian's feet left behind two trenches that were over 100 meters long on the ground before he came to a stop. He casually spat out the blood in his mouth, turned, and saw the one-eyed old man looking at him furiously. Feng Xingjian, you're really stubborn. He had not expected that Feng Xingjian would actually kill the Black Wings demon right before his eyes. However, in order to kill him, you took on my punch head-on. Right now, your internal organs are all injured, right? In such a situation, how many more punches can you take from me? Feng Xingjian wiped off the fresh blood at the corner of his lips and said, although your specialty seeds have attained perfection and your physical strength is above mine, your body's toughness is still lower than mine. Right now, your palm is still regenerating, right? At the same time, Feng Xingjian's internal organs were squirming incessantly as they regenerated. The one-eyed old man was stunned for a moment. When he had punched Feng Xingjian earlier, although he had injured Feng Xingjian, his body's toughness was not as high as Feng Xingjian's. His arm had already suffered fractures and contusions, and it had only just been regenerated. At the next moment, Feng Xingjian swung the long sword in his hand, pointing it toward the darkness demon lord in the sky. I'll kill you next. With that, with a flash, Feng Xingjian stomped on the air, causing explosions. With a series of thunderous sounds, he dashed out toward the darkness demon lord in the sky. seeing how Fong Xingjian had killed the darkness demon without any hesitation, exploding the black wings demon's head in the blink of an eye, and now charging toward him. The darkness demon lord's countenance instantly turned extremely grim. This was especially when he sensed Fong Xingjian's killing intent gushing toward him, causing him to feel a sense of suffocation. With an explosive bellow, the 10 directional hell's flag appeared before the darkness demon lord. A myriad of vengeful spirits gathered together, turning into countless willpower impacts that shot out in all directions. On the ground, countless knights let out agonizing cries and fainted from the repercussions of this series of attacks. With a loud boom, Fong Xingjian was intercepted in midair. The long sword in his hand clashed against the one-eyed old man's fist. It was unknown when, but the one-eyed old man had already put on a pair of golden dragon-shaped gloves. Amidst the impact from their martial wills, the one-eyed old man bellowed furiously, "Fong Xingjian, do you think that you're the only one with a level 29 divine weapon?" As they spoke, the two of them had already started exchanging blows intensely in midair. Bang, 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 bang. Sounds of air explosions rang out incessantly. Each time their fists and swords came into contact, there would be explosive sounds in the air, and shock waves would rise and fall. The one-eyed old man's fist arts were extremely terrifying, and he also had a physical strength that far surpassed that of Fong Xingjian's. However, Fong Xingjian's body's toughness had reached perfection, and the long and short swords in his hand were constantly drawing out streams of graceful trajectories. He would always be able to attack the enemy and save himself. This caused the one-eyed old man to be unable to fend off Fong Xingjian's attacks, even though he was filled with tremendous power. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Many wounds were slashed open on his body. The one-eyed old man had only managed to block Fong Xingjian for a short 3 seconds before blood splattered out from his chest. He let out an agonized howl and was sent flying several kilometers away. Just as he was about to cut through the atmosphere again and dash over, Fong Xingjian had already slashed down toward the darkness demon lord's head like the judgment of the Grim Reaper. Chapter 460. Countless vengeful spirits charged out toward Fong Xingjian. All sorts of negative emotions related to death, terror, hatred, and despair continued to assault Fong Xingjian's mind. However, the moment they entered Fong Xingjian's consciousness, they would be slashed into pieces by the surging Heaven's Volition sword intent. The Heaven's Volition sword intent seemed to have taken Fong Xingjian's entire consciousness as its territory, not allowing any other powers to invade it. Under its protection, all of the vengeful spirits were wiped out completely. Fong Xingjian was like an unrivaled sharp sword, slashing through the streams of vengeful spirits and arriving before the darkness demon lord, who was activating the 10 directional hell's flag at full power. Fong Xingjian slashed down with his sword, wanting to open up the other party's skull. What's going on? Why is it like this? Why is the 10 directional hell's flag ineffective against Fong Xingjian? The darkness demon lord bellowed furiously in his heart. He looked at Fong Xingjian, who was slashing down with a sword, in astonishment and fury. He could not understand what was going on. At this moment of life and death, the School of Sword Art's supreme chief, who had been watching from the sidelines without making a move, finally made his move. This demigod expert, who had attained 2 tiers of perfection in his body's toughness and specialty seeds, used a world-shaking sword move the moment he made his move. A stream of sword light cut across several hundred meters of the sky, as if it was tearing the heavens and splitting the earth apart, blocking right before Fong Xingjian. With a clang sound, Fong Xingjian was sent flying. At the next moment, the Supreme Chief's silhouette seemed to have disappeared completely, leaving behind a myriad of sword light that encompassed Fong Xingjian. It was as if a meat grinder was encompassing him. His body disappeared, leaving behind only a series of world-shaking sword moves. Fong Xingjian had never heard of such sword arts before. Almost every level 29 expert would condense all of their great arts into one, possessing a set of extremely powerful killing techniques. For example, the one-eyed old man's annihilation fist, or the astral obscurity sword that the Supreme Chief was performing. This set of sword technique was an unrivaled killing technique created by combining all of the Supreme Chief's sword arts cultivation with the School of Sword Art Supreme Manual, Star Fate sword technique. At this moment, the astral obscurity sword was displayed. The Supreme Dragon Chief's body disappeared completely, leaving only a myriad of sword flashes that shrouded Feng Xingjian's body, attacking continuously. Moreover, the Supreme Chief had attained 2 tiers of perfection in his body's toughness and specialty seeds. In terms of physical body, he was completely above Feng Xingjian. Every time he blocked a sword light, Feng Xingjian would feel his blood and chi shaking violently, and his bones creaking. Every time he dashed forward, he was confined by the layers of sword light. Every time the long sword swept out, it was destroyed by the omnipresent sword light. At the sight of this scene, the one-eyed old man sent his martial will sweeping out wildly. He laughed out maniacally and said, "Feng Xingjian, haven't you always been proud of your sword arts? Now, have a taste of the Supreme Chief sword arts and experience the sword arts that truly dominate the world and dominate the 8 regions." As he spoke, he struck out with the Annihilation Fist once again, joining in the attacks on Feng Xingjian. On the other hand, the Darkness Demon Lord's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He was still in a state of lingering fear from being almost killed by Feng Xingjian's sword earlier. As the lingering fear gradually receded, what followed was fury. "Feng Xingjian, you'll definitely die today." He waved the 10 directional hells flag rapidly, and a myriad of vengeful spirits howled in unison. Intense auras of sulfur and lava came gushing out incessantly, and at the next moment, a myriad of vengeful spirits gushed into his body. Vengeful spirits were merely the remnant information of a human body. Information was ultimately just information, or rather a soul was ultimately just a soul. In order to complete the transformation from consciousness to the material world, a physical body was required. Only the legendary divine level experts would be able to break through the isolation between consciousness and the material world. As more and more vengeful spirits gushed into the Darkness Demon Lord's body, his body continued to grow stronger, and many green veins popped up on his head. This was the second application of the 10 directional hells flag. It absorbed the power of endless vengeful spirits to strengthen one's consciousness. Amongst these vengeful spirits, there were many martial arts experts and second transition knights. Right now, all of their remnant consciousnesses were being used to reinforce the Darkness Demon Lord's power. At this moment, how powerful was his martial will? With a glare from the Darkness Demon Lord, Feng Xingjian's body flew out abruptly with a bang. With the augmentation from countless vengeful spirits, the Darkness Demon Lord's martial will went through a qualitative change, and he could now interfere with the material world. Although there might be great side effects, and he might face the danger of turning into a lunatic, it was true that the Darkness Demon Lord's martial will could not only be used in the consciousness of his enemies. Instead, it was as if it was material and could interfere with the material world. Moreover, as a type of wave, martial will was close to light speed. "Go to hell, Feng Xingjian." At the next moment, streams of extremely powerful martial will gushed out from the Darkness Demon Lord, and Feng Xingjian's body was continuously hit by streams of tremendous force. As sword light flashed incessantly in midair and the one-eyed old man's annihilation fist kept on flashing, Feng Xingjian was finally at a complete disadvantage. The one-eyed old man's martial will continue to send messages to Feng Xingjian. As he punched Feng Xingjian's body, he laughed maniacally and said, "Feng Xingjian, where did your arrogance go? With the 3 of us joining forces, you won't stand a chance at all." Faced with the trio's stacked attacks, Feng Xingjian let out a cold laugh and finally activated one of his trump cards, the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent. Streams of sword intents soared into the sky. With the reinforcement from the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent, Feng Xingjian's sword art's cultivation grew at a rapid rate. The power of the sword intense also reinforced his body, causing his power to keep on rising. With a loud boom, under the trio's astonished gazes, Feng Xingjian instantly slashed off the one-eyed old man's arms. The longsword in his hand drew out many graceful trajectories, tapping out toward the one-eyed old man's head at an extremely fast speed. However, with a soft bang, the Darkness Demon Lord's martial will had already smashed onto Feng Xingjian's sword, causing the force of the sword to be deflected, and it only managed to smash into the one-eyed old man's chest. Simultaneously, streams of sword light slashed toward Feng Xingjian's back. However, they were all blocked by Feng Xingjian's short sword. Feng Xingjian's long sword did not stop at all, and it once again tapped out toward the one-eyed old man's head. Amidst astonishment and fury, the one-eyed old man's earmuffs shattered, and strange runes flashed on them. It represented that the power of the judgment in the 36 Hells maps had been activated. With this activation, it would incite Feng Xingjian to feel endless remorse for all the things he had done in the past. In the end, he might even commit suicide. However, Feng Xingjian merely glared, and the Heaven's Volition sword intent broke through the power of the Judgment's Eye. Feng Xingjian's long sword continued to tap out toward the one-eyed old man's head. One sword after another, it was as if Feng Xingjian had to kill the one-eyed old man no matter what. The Darkness Demon Lord continued to attack the white-bone longsword in Feng Xingjian's hand with his martial will, hoping to fend off the longsword. However, he discovered that as the longsword trembled, it began to bend in a strange arc, entangling and accelerating toward the one-eyed old man's head. Feng Xingjian was using his extremely profound sword arts cultivation to make use of the Darkness Demon Lord's martial will. He had only been hit a few times by the Darkness Demon Lord's martial will, but he had already come up with a way to deal with it using his sword arts. At this moment, Hung Tianxiao finally displayed the top-notch sword art cultivation of the School of Sword Arts Supreme Chief. In that instant, the entire sky became filled with resplendent starlight. It was as if there were a myriad of flashing sword light from the stars. With an aura that seemed to be able to tear through the clouds and sky, all of them gathered onto a single point on Feng Xingjian's head. No retreat, just die. At this moment, the sword force displayed by the Supreme Chief was extremely realistic, waiting to see what Feng Xingjian would choose to do. Feng Xingjian's choice was to not retreat. A myriad of sword light turned into a single point and landed on Feng Xingjian's head. However, Feng Xingjian suddenly disappeared. At the next moment, several hundred streams of sword light encompassed the Darkness Demon Lord's body. Under the Darkness Demon Lord's horrified gaze, they continued to dismember his body. Are you crazy? Hung Tianxiao. Enraged, the Darkness Demon Lord continued to activate the 10-directional Hell's flag, bringing up streams of seemingly material martial will to fend off the sword light. The Supreme Chief said coldly, "It wasn't me." However, the sword light became increasingly dense and numerous. In the blink of an eye, it was as if a waterfall had completely engulfed the Darkness Demon Lord. All of his martial will was instantly torn apart like pieces of blue cloth, allowing the sword light to pierce through the Darkness Demon Lord's body incessantly, causing each piece of his flesh to explode. Looking at this scene, the one-eyed old man bellowed furiously. Hung Tianxiao, what are you doing? I've already said that it wasn't me. The Supreme Chief's cold voice rang out. Just then, Feng Xingjian's silhouette slowly appeared where the Darkness Demon Lord had been. With a sweep of his long sword, the 10-directional Hell's flag was shattered into a myriad of pieces. Astral Obscurity Sword? I've already learned it. It turned out that the person Feng Xingjian really wanted to kill was the Darkness Demon Lord, just as he had said at the start, despite attracting everyone to guard against the one-eyed old man. And the sword technique that had killed the Darkness Demon Lord was the Supreme Chief's Astral Obscurity Sword. Chapter 461. Astral Obscurity Sword? I've already learned it. The Heaven's Volition Sword Intent still had 12 seconds left before it could be used. During the few seconds when he had used the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent to reinforce himself, as well as the exchange earlier, Feng Xingjian had learned the Supreme Chief's Astral Obscurity Sword. Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, both the one-eyed old man and the Supreme Chief were astonished, not daring to believe it. However, at the next moment, Feng Xingjian had already attacked once again, leaving them with no choice but to believe it. In midair, Feng Xingjian's silhouette disappeared in an instant. The Astral Obscurity Sword used unrivaled sword arts to search for spatial gaps that were omnipresent yet hard to sense. Then one's physical body would enter the spatial gaps and attack the enemies in the real world purely with sword arts. At this moment, Feng Xingjian's entire body had already entered the spatial gaps, and the one-eyed old man had completely lost track of him. An unprecedented sense of terror gushed into the one-eyed old man's heart. He felt as if there was a sword that would drop down on his head at any moment, and his head could be chopped off at any moment. Therefore, he instantly started moving at high speed. He kept on moving irregularly in midair, sending out streams of strong gales, making it impossible for others to lock onto his position. Simultaneously, he bellowed out in his martial will, "Hung Tianxiao, stop him quickly!" Right now, the Supreme Chief was also in the spatial gaps. However, there was no direct connection between the gaps. If he wanted to find the other party, he could only do so one by one. How would he be able to make it in time? Moreover, at this moment, his mind was still filled with disbelief. I spent a total of 3 years in seclusion to create the Astral Obscurity Sword. I then spent a total of 10 years to continuously adjust, optimize, and integrate all the sword techniques from the School of Sword Arts into it. Only then did I reach the current level 30 Astral Obscurity Sword. And yet, Feng Xingjian, it has only been 1 to 2 minutes, but he has already learned it? At the next moment, the white bow and longsword suddenly appeared with a flash, appearing before the one-eyed old man who was moving at high speed. It was as if it had been waiting there, slashing down diagonally with a terrifying force. An extremely sharp sword intent descended from the sky, accompanied by Feng Xingjian's voice, which entered the old man's mind. "Since you're able to withstand my sword, what harm is there in sparing your life?" Accompanied by the cracking sounds of the continental plates shattering, the area within a radius of 8 kilometers became a gravity-free environment. Countless rocks, grass, and trees flew into the sky, and countless wild knights screamed and flew into the air. The gravity within a range of 8 kilometers had all gathered into Feng Xingjian's sword. After performing the terror ingurgitation with the Astral Obscurity Sword and killing the 2 leaders of the Black Wings, Feng Xingjian finally performed the terror ingurgitation once again, vowing to kill the one-eyed old man before him. Before the sword arrived, the violent energy had already completely shattered the one-eyed old man's armor. Following that, his flesh and blood began to disintegrate bit by bit. What kind of sword technique is this? What kind of power is this? The one-eyed old man had never sensed such a terrifying power from the gravitational force within a range of 8 kilometers, even from the first prince. Amidst his furious bellows, a total of 1,440 specialty seeds on his body self-detonated. He put his palms together, turning them into the shape of a treasure bottle. All the profoundness of martial arts was gathered into his fist in a state of great annihilation, annihilation, and annihilation gushed out from his body. Simultaneously, layers of cracks appeared on his face like shattered porcelain. Waves of destructive aura continued to seep out from the cracks. If one wished to annihilate everything in the world, they would first have to annihilate themselves. The one-eyed old man's annihilation fist's ultimate profoundness was unleashed at full force, and all the comprehensions he had accumulated throughout his life gushed out in this punch. The fist collided with Feng Xingjian's white bone longsword. There was no world-shaking impact, as one had imagined, nor was there any so-called collision. It was as if a container truck had run over a tin can. The gravitational force within a range of 8 kilometers swept through the one-eyed old man's entire body within a billionth of a second. His body was like a tin can that had been compressed and deformed, eventually turning into a mist of blood that drifted in midair. However, the power of terra ingurgitation was far too strong. Even though it had swept through the one-eyed old man's body, it continued to sweep out toward the area behind him. Wherever it passed by, the cloud layers within a range of over 100 kilometers were all dispersed, creating a clear sky for the next day. On the ground, countless wild knights fainted amidst the explosive sounds of the air being compressed. Feng Xingjian had first killed the Black Wings demon by exchanging blows with the Heaven's Volition sword intent, then comprehended the Astral Obscurity sword to kill the Darkness Demon Lord. He then performed the Astral Obscurity sword together with Terra Ingurgitation to kill the one-eyed old man with a single sword attack. Feng Xingjian's series of attacks were almost all of his ultimate moves, and he had achieved astonishing results. In the spatial gaps, the Supreme Chief only felt a chill in his heart, as if he was a fox mourning the death of a rabbit. He had not expected that they had come with great confidence, but now they had been killed and he was the only one left. This made him feel extremely complicated. There was anger, shame, sorrow, and a hint of fear toward Feng Xingjian. In midair, Feng Xingjian's figure suddenly appeared, lightly flicking the 2 white bone swords in his hands, one long and one short. Feng Xingjian said calmly, "Hung Tianxiao, are you still not coming out? I've already cultivated your Astral Obscurity sword to level 21. I was just about to seek your guidance." Hung Tianxiao did not appear. Right now, the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief was observing Feng Xingjian from the spatial gaps. He felt a chill in his heart. However, he also felt that it was a pity. If the first prince hadn't recalled all the clones in our bodies in order to strive for the divine level, we wouldn't have suffered such a crushing defeat. Therefore, he still did not appear. Only a voice rang out, getting further and further away. "Feng Xingjian, we've lost this time around. However, the first prince is about to come out from his seclusion. At that time, he'll personally make a move to kill you. You better think about how you're going to endure the first prince's wrath." Feng Xingjian let out a cold laugh, and his martial will swept out wildly. "Hung Tianxiao, go back and tell George that there's no need for him to come over. Even if he attains the divine level, even if he hides in the palace in the future, it won't be long before I head over personally and kill him." Arrogant. Leaving these 2 words behind coldly, Hung Tianxiao's aura completely dissipated. It was as if he had really left. Seeing that Feng Xingjian had really taken on 3 great experts single-handedly and even killed the Darkness Demon Lord, the previous governor of the BI's continent, everyone present was truly astonished. With such battle prowess and abilities, other than those at the divine level, probably only demigods with 3 or 4 tiers of perfection would be a match for them. They watched as Feng Xingjian held 2 swords, killed 3 great experts, and forced the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief to retreat with his final words. Everyone's eyes were filled with astonishment. The Ice Palace's saint looked at Feng Xingjian in a daze. There was only one thought in her mind. It's only worth it for a person to be able to live to such an extent. Killing an expert with perfection in specialty seeds with a single sword attack and learning the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief's strongest killing technique in less than a minute of battle. A sword master of his generation, a true sword master of his generation. The Illumination Society's chief let out a sigh and said, "Feng Xingjian sword arts are probably unmatched among those below the divine level." He looked at the figure in the sky and said calmly, "All of you open your eyes wide and take a good look at this scene. This is a legend, and this is history. All of you are witnessing the beginning of a legend. In less than a year's time, this person will definitely attain the divine level. He will then be unrivaled in the world and create an unprecedented legend." Chapter 462. In the sky, Feng Xingjian remained motionless. It was because after this battle, he had felt a sense of joy, exhilaration, and excitement. After going through countless painful training sessions, he could finally be considered to be standing amongst the top-notch experts in the world. This was with the exception of those divine-level experts who had not made a move for many years. Right now, Fang Xingjian already had the ability to compete with the top-notch experts in the world. At this moment, the mental cultivation method in his brain circulated at high speed, and his proficiency level kept on increasing. He was just a little short of leveling up once again, bringing the universal sword dominance lunisolar mental cultivation method to level 8. Simultaneously, another set of sword techniques appeared in his mind. It was the astral obscurity sword which he had just learned. As the astral obscurity sword appeared, the other sword techniques, including the zenith light sword formation, prodigious demolition sword physique, universal truth longsword, and ether sword ripples, all started to tremble slightly. It was as if they were constantly exuding an attractive force, wanting to gather together and turn into a set of world-shaking killing techniques at all times. However, Fang Xingjian stopped them and said slowly, "Wait a minute, wait a little longer." Tyrant's voice rang out in Fang Xingjian's mind. "Fang Xingjian, you must resist the temptation. At level 29, you'll be able to fuse all your killing techniques into one. The first great fusion is extremely important as it will directly affect the direction of your sword arts in the future. You must be fully prepared before you can fuse them." Fang Xingjian nodded to indicate that he understood. At the next moment, he took a step forward and appeared before the Illumination Society's chief in a flash. Without waiting for anyone to say anything, an extremely sharp martial will gushed into everyone's minds. "I've saved you guys. If you want to repay me, then use your faction's specialty seeds to exchange for it." This was something that was only logical. Although everyone was not used to it when Fang Xingjian said it out loud, the Illumination Society's chief still nodded and said, "Sure. You've saved our Illumination Society. You can have access to all of our manuals." The others also voiced their agreement, agreeing to hand over their specialty seeds condensing methods. What a joke. Seeing how Fang Xingjian had consecutively killed 3 great experts and forced the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief to back off, Fang Xingjian's prestige in the Great Western Region's sects was like the noon sun. Moreover, right now, Fang Xingjian did not intend to take them in. He merely wanted to see how they condensed their specialty seeds. Fang Xingjian nodded, looked at the Illumination Society's president, and said, "I'll leave the collection to you. I'll get someone to collect it in a few days." After saying that, he leaped into the air and appeared several kilometers away in the sky. At the foot of the mountain, countless people watched as Fang Xingjian gradually turned into a small dot in the sky. Their eyes were filled with admiration. In the following month, news of the battle in the Great Western Region spread throughout the entire empire like a plague. Fang Xingjian's name could be said to have shaken the entire world. Peter fled quickly in the mountains. He crawled in the shadows of the forest again and again, constantly lurking, hiding, and running. His head was full of cold sweat. Terrifying. It's too terrifying. How could that Fang Xingjian be so powerful? Thank goodness I've been hiding in the crowd. If I had stood out earlier on, I would probably have been killed as well. Thinking of how Fang Xingjian had taken on 3 great experts single-handedly, and how even the one-eyed old man had not been a match for him, Peter felt his heart tremble. Just then, Peter's footsteps suddenly came to a halt. It was because Fang Xingjian was standing quietly before him. The white-boned dual swords in his hands had disappeared, and Fang Xingjian had his hand behind his back, facing Peter. He said calmly, "Since when did you have the delusion that you can escape?" Peter felt his heart beating increasingly faster, and cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. He let out a roar that sounded like that of a wild beast. "Fang Xingjian, what do you want?" "Hildebrand, tell me where he is." "He instigated Tinin to attack me, and then got his grandfather to attack me. If I don't chop off his head, I won't be able to rest easy," Fang Xingjian said as he looked at the mental cultivation method on his stats window, which was just a little away from leveling up. Peter let out a bitter laugh and said, Fang Xinjian, are you really going to kill me? As long as you bring me to meet him, I can let you live. Really? Hearing that, Peter said with his eyes wide open. Right now, Fang Xinjian was the most terrifying character in his eyes, with the exception of the first prince. He could not summon any will to resist. Fang Xinjian said calmly, with your insignificant abilities, there's no difference whether I kill you or not. Bring me to meet Hildebrand, and I'll let you live. However, if you still dare to make an enemy out of me in the future, I won't let you live either. Hearing this, Peter quickly said, Don't worry. There's no need to say anything else. As long as you let me off this time around, I swear that I'll never make an enemy out of you ever again. What a joke. After witnessing Fang Xinjian's brutality, how could he possibly dare to offend him? In his heart, Fang Xinjian had long since become someone whom he could never afford to offend in this lifetime. However, I only know the rough location. He's currently in a base. That base is very well hidden, and I've never really entered it before. Fang Xinjian nodded. The rough location is enough. I'll just look for him when I get there. Therefore, a few minutes later, Fang Xinjian grabbed Peter and dashed across the sky, flying at a rapid speed toward the location Peter had pointed out. In the southwest of the empire, at the border of the eastern sand region, due to the constant war with the sand country and the desert, this place was extremely chaotic. There were all sorts of killings happening everywhere. There were tough tribes at the borders, brutal bandits, and many regular soldiers who would occasionally act as bandits and robbers. There were even many evil cults who came to recruit believers after hearing the news. All sorts of killings and chaos caused the political and economic environment here to be unable to develop. However, it had also become an ideal experimental field in the eyes of some influences. Fang Xinjian looked at the endless desert under his feet, frowned, and said, He came here. Peter, who was being grabbed by the back, looked at the vast desert and said, It should be here. However, the desert is too big. Back then, I traveled with Hildebrand for a very long time. He was brought away by himself, and I only followed him here. He said that he entered one of the first prince's secret bases. However, he didn't tell me the exact location or how to enter. Looking at the great desert, Fang Xinjian's eyes narrowed. Let's look around. Just as Fang Xinjian was at the border of the eastern sand region, searching for Hildebrand's traces, news of his battle at the Heavenly Shadow Mountain had gradually spread out, even reaching the great western city. Faced with this astonishing news, the first thing most people chose to do was to not believe it. After all, it had already been slightly over half a year since Fang Xinjian had completed the second transition, yet he had already defeated the Night Emperor and the Illumination Society's chief. This was already unbelievable. Later on, it was said that he had defeated the Supreme Chief, the Darkness Demon Lord, and the previous governor of the BI's continent. It was truly unbelievable. However, as more and more eyewitness reports came in, as well as news that seemed to be true, as well as the information which the various influences had sent people to verify repeatedly, the heads of countless influences had no choice but to admit this news. To think that Fang Xinjian, this genius who had only completed the second transition for slightly over half a year, had really defeated the Supreme Chief, the Darkness Demon Lord, and the previous governor of the BI's continent. Countless people realized that a new legend was about to be born. Chapter 463. In a remote alley in the eastern outskirts of the great western city, Ming Weisha, who belonged to the Sand Country's secret guard, was waiting. She was still thinking about the mission this time around. Fang Xinjian. This time around, she had only one goal in secretly infiltrating the great western region, to gather information on Fang Xinjian. The priority of this mission was even higher than that of the heavenly primordial annihilation armor. This was also because the Sand Country's upper echelon had already noticed Fang Xinjian's potential. In particular, his rebirth sword technique was highly regarded by the Sand Country. The Sand Country's upper echelon had already determined that Fang Xinjian was an extremely great threat. They felt that although he was not very strong, He had great potential and should be eliminated as soon as possible. Of course, it would be even better if they could kidnap him or instigate him to come to the Sand Country. This was also Mingyue Sha's goal this time around. She was the first to gather information so that she could provide information to those who would come later. Right now, she was waiting here to gather some information regarding Fang Xingjian. Just then, a black-clothed man entered the alley. Mingyue Sha frowned and said, "You're late." The black-clothed man shook his head. "We're not doing business with you anymore." "Not doing business?" Mingyue Sha said angrily. "You guys want to go back on your word?" It's not that we want to go back on our word. It's just that Fang Xingjian has already been blacklisted by us. We won't be selling any of his private information anymore." Mingyue Sha asked in astonishment, "Why?" From what she knew, only those divine-level experts and demigods at the peak of the divine level would receive such treatment. "On account that we've been customers for many years." The black-clothed man said calmly, "Let me personally give you a piece of news. One day ago, Fang Xingjian single-handedly fought against the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief, the Darkness Demon Lord, and the previous governor of the BI's continent. Currently, most people think that he is the genius expert in the Empire who has the highest chance of attaining the divine level in recent years, with the exception of the First Prince. If I were you, I'd put Fang Xingjian on the list of people I would never want to make an enemy of." The captain of the Sand Country's secret guards listened to this series of news in a daze, as if he could not believe what he had just heard. In the Great Western Region's Regional Academy, Holt walked excitedly. Along the way, people would occasionally greet him and try to get close to him. This divine-level disciple, who had come in second in the regional selection and had been defeated by Fang Xingjian, had been working hard in his cultivation over the past few months, other than getting intimate with the regional chief's daughter. Initially, he had wanted to give up on Fang Xingjian's talent. However, the financial support that his sect, the Myriad Stars Palace, had sent him previously gave him new hope. Of course, he did not know that this was the preparation the Myriad Stars Palace had made in order to deal with the seventh onslaught. They had allocated funds to most of the disciples with potential, hoping that they would be able to raise their abilities quickly. He only thought that he was more valued by the sect. Therefore, during this period of time, he had been working so hard that he had never worked so hard in the past 20 years. His only goal was to catch up to Fang Xingjian and defeat Fang Xingjian. Yesterday, he had finally reached level 23. To be able to reach this stage within a mere 7 months, he could be said to be a genius amongst geniuses. Moreover, he had also truly mastered the Myriad Stars Palace's killing technique, the Myriad Stars Atlas, and now possessed extremely powerful abilities. An hour ago, he had even defeated a conferred knight ranked 20th in the academy, a level 24 expert. To be able to get into the top 20 in the academy within a mere half a year or so, this would be considered an amazing result in any regional academy. Just then, a gorgeously dressed young lady walked over and looked at Holt with a strange expression. It was Miley, the daughter of the Great Western Region's regional chief. Holt said passionately, "Miley, I've won. I'm now in the Academy's top 20. Miley nodded, a little distracted, and said, "Congratulations." Holt could clearly sense that she was distracted and asked, "What's wrong? Is something the matter?" Miley frowned slightly and said, "Father wants me to meet Fang Xingjian in a few days' time." "Fang Xingjian? Why is it him again? What does your father mean by this?" Miley threw a surprised glance at Holt and said, "You still don't know?" Holt was slightly stunned. Know what? He had been in seclusion during this period of time and had not had the time to pay attention to such news. Miley sighed and said, 2 days ago, Fang Xingjian single-handedly defeated the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief, the Darkness Demon Lord, and the previous governor of the BI's continent. The Supreme Chief was forced to retreat, and the other 2 were killed on the spot. Holt immediately said, "That's impossible. The Supreme Chief is a demigod expert and is said to have completed 2 tiers of perfection. How could he have lost to Fang Xingjian? Who spread this news?" Miley threw a pitiful glance at Holt. She knew that he had always thought of Fang Xingjian as his rival and was trying his best to catch up to him. This news has been verified by many people. There's no way that it's wrong. How is that possible? How could this be? Holt said, a little dazed. To think that he was able to defeat a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection in just 7 months? How on earth did he do that? Miley flicked her hair and looked at Holt, who seemed to be in a daze. Was he still that elegant and talented divine-level disciple she knew? Unknowingly, a hint of disappointment flashed in her mind, and she suddenly felt anticipation toward meeting Feng Xingjian in the Northern Ice region's sacred land. Rellings, who was thought to have the potential to strive for the divine level and had helped Feng Xingjian with the rebirth sword technique before, laughed out loud. His younger brother stood at the side, shook his head, and said, "If I hadn't verified it repeatedly, I wouldn't have believed that Feng Xingjian would be able to do this. Big brother, you have good foresight. Back then, you owed him a favor. This is a great favor." Rellings grinned. Those fools in the clan didn't even think about it. How could the genius who invented the rebirth sword technique be suppressed so easily? Simultaneously, a hint of astonishment flashed in his eyes. Although he had already ascertained that Feng Xingjian was not an ordinary person after seeing the rebirth sword technique, he had not expected Feng Xingjian to improve so quickly. To think that Feng Xingjian had managed to defeat the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief in just a short half a year. He suddenly let out a sigh and said, "Feng Xingjian, not only will his name shake the world, but he'll probably overshadow the radiance of our few generations." In a northern country, in a sanctuary of the Holy See of Truth, Gardner, a member of the Holy Inquisition Court who was known as the Knight of the Rising Sun, hurried toward the Grand Executor's office. He did not know what urgent matter his superior had to have summoned him so urgently. The moment Gardner entered the office, he discovered that other than his superior, several other important characters from the Holy Inquisition Court were already seated at the side. There were a few among them whose identities made Gardner feel slightly terrified. When his superior saw Gardner enter, he asked directly, "Gardner, when you escorted the Archbishop to the Sinkota Empire previously, you worked together with Feng Xingjian on the martial techniques grading plan, right?" At the thought of Feng Xingjian, Gardner's countenance turned slightly unnatural. Although he was astonished by Feng Xingjian's talent, the conflict between him and this lad had always been a thorn in his heart. However, when he heard his superior's question, he still answered directly, "Yes." What does he look like? Chapter 464. Therefore, what followed next was the gathering of all sorts of information regarding Feng Xingjian. They even asked about what kind of person Feng Xingjian was, his views toward the Holy See of Truth, the God of universal truth, and whether he was married and had children. In the end, they asked about Feng Xingjian's appearance in great detail. They even got Gardner to send over all the images of Feng Xingjian's appearance through information currents and martial will. The countenances of the several members of the upper echelon changed slightly, and they nodded to each other before leaving. Gardner watched them leave respectfully. He thought of how Feng Xingjian's appearance had still attracted the attention of the members of the Holy See of Truth's upper echelon. Concurrently, he could not help but ask his superior, "Boss, what on earth is going on? Is the church going to deal with Feng Xingjian?" "It can't be considered as dealing with him," Gardner's superior said after giving it some thought. "Since you'll find out sooner or later, I'll just tell you in advance. 3 days ago, in the Sinkota Empire's Great Western region, Feng Xingjian single-handedly defeated a level 29 expert, a demigod with 1 tier of perfection, and a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection. Moreover, the 3 of them had joined forces. Feng Xingjian killed 2 of them, and the remaining demigod, with 2 tiers of perfection, managed to escape." What? Gardner listened to this news with a slightly dazed gaze. He felt that he could understand all the words that Gardner had said, but he was unable to understand them when they were put together. To think that Feng Xingjian has defeated a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection? At the next moment, an uncontrollable feeling of dejection filled up Gardner's entire body. Gardner knew that he had been surpassed mercilessly by Feng Xingjian at an unknown time, and he would never have the chance to overtake Fong Xingjian again. The distance between them would only get further and further apart as time passed by. Is talent really that important? Anthony sat on the sofa, feeling a little uneasy. He looked at the tea on the table and let out a helpless sigh. This was already the 10th day since he had arrived at the Eastern Sand region's Wang clan. His objective for coming here was naturally to invite the Wang clan to participate in Fong Xingjian's plan to forge a longsword that was a divine remains equipment for Fong Xingjian, using that piece of divine-level spinal bone as the main material. However, other than the young miss of the Wang clan receiving him on the first day, no one else from the Wang clan came to see him. Just like that, he came to report every day. Usually, he would wait from morning until night. The other party would say that someone was busy and did not have time to see him, and that he should come again tomorrow. However, after enduring like this for 10 days, he did not gain nothing. At least he had a clear understanding of the Wang family's attitude. As a top-notch forging clan in the world, a clan that had the experience of forging divine remains equipment, the Wang clan was still very arrogant. In the past 10 days, Anthony had seen countless powers come to request a weapon but were unable to obtain one. Countless people had prepared all of their materials and begged the Wang family to forge a weapon but were unsuccessful. Beside Anthony, an old man said, "Looks like there's no hope today." The old man had arrived 3 days earlier than him and had also waited for a long time. Anthony smiled and did not say anything. Just then, a steward of the Wang clan walked in, threw a glance toward Anthony and the old man, and said casually, "The head steward still doesn't have time today. Please, the two of you." As the Wang clan steward, he was already used to the flattery of those who wanted to purchase weapons. The old man walked up, stuffed a few gold coins into the steward's hands, and pleaded, "Steward Zhao, please help me." Steward Zhao nodded slowly and said, "All right, I'll help you ask tomorrow." He then threw a sideways glance toward Anthony. Anthony sighed and said, "Steward Zhao, I've been giving you money for tea every day, and you've also said that you'll help me ask. However, it's been 10 days, and there's still no result?" Steward Zhao frowned. The Wang clan is a big clan and has a lot of business to attend to every day. There are so many people from the governor and the regional chief waiting for you. What else do you want? At the very least, there should be a process to let me know what my position is, right?" Steward Zhao's eyes narrowed, and he said, "Do we need you to supervise our Wang clan's matters? I'll bring this up to the head steward. I think you might as well not come tomorrow, no, for the next month." He then flicked his sleeves and left, causing the old man to sigh repeatedly. He pointed to Anthony and said, "You're still too young. It's not good to offend someone like this. I just can't stand his attitude. He makes it seem as if we're begging him. He took the money and did nothing. What difference does it make whether we pay or not?" The old man shook his head. "Some people are already doing us a favor by not doing anything." Anthony smiled in a self-mocking manner. He had not expected that it would be so difficult to enter the Wang clan. However, a few minutes later, Steward Zhao suddenly walked in with an awkward expression, forcing a smile. Under the old man's astonished gaze, he looked at Anthony and asked, "Mr. Anthony, may I ask if you were sent by Master Fong Xingjian?" Anthony nodded, feeling puzzled. Steward Zhao smiled and walked over, saying apologetically, I'm sorry, Mr. Anthony. The head steward has already instructed me to send you over. It's my negligence. Come. The head steward and the young miss want to meet you now. Let's go quickly." Anthony looked at Steward Zhao with a puzzled expression. On the first day he had arrived, he had already expressed that he was sent by Fong Xingjian. However, over the past 10 days, he had met many governors, regional chiefs, and even representatives from the central government's upper echelon. This made him realize that even though Fong Xingjian was known as a genius, it was not very useful here. The other party's current enthusiasm made him extremely puzzled. However, he did not know that Steward Zhao could not understand why the young miss' attitude toward Anthony had suddenly undergone a 180-degree change, causing Steward Zhao to feel extremely awkward. However, under the young Miss pressure, he had no choice but to change his attitude toward Anthony. He felt so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Just as countless people and influences were changing because of Feng Xinjiang, Feng Xinjiang stood in midair, looked at the sand dune under his feet, and said, "Recently, the disappearance of a few soldiers happened here. They should be in the vicinity." With that, he tossed Peter out and said with his martial will, "Wait for me here." At the next moment, with a dash, he dashed down toward the underground of the desert. Underground, there were densely packed corridors everywhere. Many staff members wearing white uniforms were walking around, looking extremely busy. The golden-haired Hildebrand, who looked like a prince, stood at the control panel, looking at the situation in the various laboratories. He broke into a satisfied and excited smile. Next to him was Feng Qian, who was dressed in a black battle uniform. She was the Feng clan's genius who had supported the Black Warrior during the war at the West Coast and had even wanted to capture Feng Xinjiang. Hildebrand said, "Miss Feng, it's all thanks to the cloning information that you guys have provided. The nurturing of divine-level cells has increased tremendously. Once the plan is completed, we'll be able to produce countless divine-level clones and create a divine-level army." Feng Qian's eyes narrowed slightly. She had not expected that cloning technology would be so adaptable in Miracle World, nor had she expected that the ancient path of Hell's technological prowess would be so great that they could successfully replicate a portion of the cells from the divine remains. Hearing Hildebrand's words, she shook her head and said, "It's not that easy. The nutrients that divine-level cells require are too difficult to obtain. The nurturing of demigod bodies is more promising. Test subject number 13 has already succeeded. As long as the consciousness transfer experiment is successful, you'll be able to leap 2 tiers of perfection in one go and possess a demigod clone." Hearing this, Hildebrand was secretly excited. However, when he saw the lady next to him, his countenance turned solemn. This lady, who was dressed strangely, had been introduced to him by the first prince. He did not know her background or identity. He only knew that when she had first arrived, she had only been at level 21. In less than a year's time, she had already stepped into level 29. Her strength was even comparable to that of a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. It was unbelievable. Chapter 465. Feng Qian said calmly. When they returned later, they must hand Feng Xinjiang over to me. A cold gleam flashed in her eyes. "I'll take care of him personally." Clearly, they were located in a remote area and did not know about the news from the Great Western region. Hildebrand naturally did not know that Feng Qian had come from another world, nor did he know that she possessed the power of Magic Prince. Her powers came from the evil gods beyond the heavens. Therefore, there were no bottlenecks in leveling up to the second transition. Just by praying and communicating with the gods every day, one's powers would increase explosively. This was also the reason why there were so many Magic Prince warrior experts on Earth, and even a few divine-level experts had appeared in just over 10 years. In Hildebrand's opinion, Feng Qian only had extraordinary talent and was someone whom the first prince thought highly of. However, this was enough for him to respect her. Hildebrand said, "Haha, of course. When the time comes, we'll hand Feng Xinjiang over to you. However, he has outstanding talent and is also a very special talent. Don't kill him when the time comes." Feng Qian smiled and said with a profound expression, "Don't worry, I can't bear to kill him." Just then, alarms rang out throughout the secret base. "What's going on?" Hildebrand asked puzzledly. Ever since he came to this secret base, which the first prince had spent a lot of effort to build, this was the first time he had heard alarms. Usually, even if the Sand Country's army were to pass by, an adjutant would merely report it. At the next moment, a knight adjutant ran up to Hildebrand and said, "Reporting to the 2 of you. The commander-in-chief has asked for the 2 of you to make a trip to the command center." The commander-in-chief of this base was the Phantom Church's leader, known as the Phantom Knight. He could be said to be one of the first prince's trusted subordinates, and also one of the existences who had signed the Hell's Map. Otherwise, The first prince would not be at ease to hand over such an important base to him. When the two of them heard the adjutant's report, they exchanged a glance and saw the puzzlement in each other's eyes. What on earth has happened? Not long later, the two of them rushed to the command center. However, they discovered that not only the commander-in-chief, the Phantom Knight, but the other two people who had signed the 36 Hells maps had also arrived. The man sitting on the left side of the table had a feminine look on his face. From time to time, there would be a chilling sneer on his face. His entire body exuded a strange and inexplicable atmosphere. Hildebrand recognized this person. He was an exiled second transition knight from the Steel Lion Kingdom in the north, Gallant and Raged Lion. He belonged to the intelligence department of the Steel Lion Kingdom in the first place. He had grasped countless secret arts of slaughter, and he was even more adept at stealth, ambushes, and assassinations. He could be said to be a master of darkness and intelligence. On the left, a man carrying a 2-meter-long giant bow sat quietly. The man looked very ordinary, and there was no aura coming from him. He looked no different from an ordinary person. If there was anything special about him, it would be that he was too quiet. Even the sound of his breathing and heartbeat could not be heard. He was like a dead person. Hildebrand knew that this person was a death warrior whom the first prince had nurtured since young. It was said that he was the only one who had survived after going through countless brutal training and massacres among over 1,000 knight apprentices. He could be said to be a death warrior who truly existed for the sake of massacres. He did not have a name, only a code name, Death Warrior. Although he had been sitting quietly, he had been continuously attempting to condense specialty seeds. Clearly, he had been working hard to attain perfection in his specialty seeds. Seeing the arrival of Hildebrand and Feng Qian, the commander-in-chief, the Phantom Knight, nodded. He was a middle-aged man with a small mustache and neatly combed hair. He looked rather charming. "Take a seat," the Phantom Knight said. "Someone has invaded." "Invaded?" The enraged lion smiled coldly and said, "There are really people who are not afraid of death. Is it intentional or unintentional? It should be intentional. Moreover, they are very strong and have already broken through the second layer of defense," the Phantom Knight said. "Wait a minute. They've already broken through the third layer of defense." He frowned and said, "It's too fast. Something's not right. Let me use my illusory mirror image to take a look." The Phantom Knight came from a faction known as the Phantom Church. The entire Phantom Church could be said to have been subdued by the first prince and stationed in this desert base. The Phantom Knight had set up an illusory barrier throughout the entire desert base, allowing him to observe the mirror images of many places at any time. As he formed seals with his hands, there seemed to be water ripples flowing in the air. They gradually formed a water mirror, reflecting the mirror image in the distance. In this mirror image, Feng Xinjiang was walking around as if he was taking a stroll in the streets. Occasionally, sword light would slash out, breaking through layers of barriers as he headed toward the depths of the base. Not long later, he encountered a group of knights. However, with a flash of his silhouette, that group of knights had already fallen to the ground. "This guy is..." The Phantom Knight looked at the mirror image, a little puzzled. However, Hildebrand had already started shouting, "It's Feng Xinjiang. How can it be him? Why has he come here?" The Phantom Knight tilted his head as he watched the layers of defense crumble. He said coldly, "Isn't Feng Xinjiang in the Great Western region? Hung Tianxiao and the others should have gone to deal with him. Could it be that the two parties have missed each other?" The enraged lion grinned. "But how did he manage to find this place? It can't be that Feng Xinjiang defeated Hung Tianxiao and the others and then forced them to reveal the location of the base, right? That's impossible," Hildebrand said. "The Supreme Chief is a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection, and Grandfather is also a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. Although the Darkness Demon Lord is a little weaker, with the help of the 10 directional Hells flag, he could be comparable to a demigod with 1 tier of perfection after activating the Death Dominion. With the 3 of them joining forces to suppress Feng Xinjiang, how could they possibly be defeated? Based on the intelligence, Feng Xinjiang's highest estimate is that he's only at one tier of perfection. Then the situation is very strange. The enraged lion lifted his head, looked at Feng Xingjian's mirror image, and said, "We'll probably have to ask this lad to find out." "There's no hurry," the Phantom Knight said. "From the fourth layer of defense onward, we've used the Netherworld Dojo and Super Alloy for reinforcement. Even if he wants to break through, it'll take him a very long time. Let's take a look at this genius's abilities first." The Netherworld Dojo was a barrier that the First Prince had personally set up across the entire base. It had a powerful defense and could absorb and divert most attacks. The closer one was to the core, the stronger the defense would be. It could be said that each layer was more powerful than the one before it. Just as the Phantom Knight was saying this, Feng Xingjian had already arrived before a sealed steel door. This was the fourth layer of defense. It was reinforced by the Netherworld Dojo, and it was also forged from the super alloy developed by the First Prince. Its toughness was comparable to that of a level 25 superior divine weapon. Moreover, the walls were 10 meters thick and could be said to be an impenetrable fortress. Even a demigod expert would probably need to spend over 10 minutes or even several hours to break through this layer. After the fourth layer of defense, there were 5 even more powerful layers of defense. It showed how much importance the First Prince placed on this desert base. Then, under everyone's astonished gazes, as Feng Xingjian walked forward, sword light continued to sweep past 1 meter before him. Each light sword slashed into the physical particles at a frequency of over 10,000 vibrations, forcefully slashing the streams of heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces that were connected to the physical particles. It was as if he was passing through a layer of tofu, passing through the 10-meter-thick defensive layers step by step. Although the faint yellow glow of the Netherworld Dojo kept flashing past, wanting to fend off the sword light, they were unable to do so. They were easily shattered like glass. Seeing how Feng Xingjian had broken through the fourth layer of defense so easily, the countenances of everyone in the command center turned grim. Chapter 466. This Feng Xingjian is not easy to deal with. He actually broke through the fourth layer of defense so easily. The enraged lion frowned and said, "His swordsmanship is too powerful. If we fight, I'm afraid his attacks will be even more ferocious. Against such a person, passive defense won't work." Hildebrand said, "Let's take him down directly. We must find out how the location of the base was leaked. He's really courting death." He actually dared to walk right into the trap. However, the Phantom Knight shook his head and said, "We still have to be more cautious. Don't fail miserably." At the thought of this, he added, "Let the zombie troops go and scout out the situation first." The zombie troops were the failed products of the desert base's experiments. They were all zombies who had lost their consciousness and were only left with physical impulses. However, their average abilities were all at the pinnacle of the first transition. Furthermore, they were in a state where they did not fear death and had no weaknesses other than their brains. They were even more suitable to be used as cannon fodder. The enraged lion shook his head and said, "The zombie army is too weak. We can't find anything." He then looked at Feng Qian with a smile and said, "Miss Feng, haven't you always wanted the combat information of the experimentals? Why don't we let a few experimentals fight with Feng Xingjian?" A gleam flashed in Feng Qian's eyes. She also felt that this was a good idea. In fact, until now, none of the 5 people present had treated Feng Xingjian as a real threat. After all, there were 5 level 29 experts in the meeting room alone. Among them, Feng Qian and the Phantom Knight were demigods with 1 tier of perfection. The longbow that the Death Warriors carried on their backs was a level 29 divine weapon bestowed by the First Prince, Hellfire. This made his lethality comparable to any demigod with 1 tier of perfection. Moreover, the desert base had already been set up with layers of defensive barriers by the First Prince, and there were even over 10 experimental bodies created by Feng Qian. Each of them had the ability to go up against a conferred knight. With this kind of strength, although the crowd was surprised by Feng Xingjian's arrival, they did not panic. Fang Qian nodded and said with a smile, I'm also very interested in the experimental subject's battle prowess. Ordinary Sand Country's army won't be able to determine the limits of their abilities. Fang Xingjian continued walking in a straight line, going deeper and deeper into the ground as if he was taking an elevator. The entire desert base was like a ball buried underground. Layers of defense enveloped the entire base, and all the cores were located at the very center of the base. Along the way, be it the armor plates, the defensive layers, or the guards, none of them could block a single strike from Fang Xingjian. Finally, after advancing another 500 meters, a huge snow-white wall made of unknown material appeared in front of Fang Xingjian. It was the 5th defensive layer of the base. Fang Xingjian didn't know how many of these things there were in the base. He just frowned and thought to himself, they really like to wear turtle shells. Just then, he saw a strange figure standing under the white wall. Upon taking a closer look, he could see that it was a strange person who was covered in a layer of metal. The strange person stood there with his arms crossed, looked at Fang Xingjian, and said with a smile, Hello, intruder. He shrugged. I really have to thank you. If it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't have had the chance to be released like this. With that, the corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a cruel smile. In return, I can let you choose how you want to die. In the command center, Fang Qian looked at the metallic strange person proudly and said, Test subject number 3 is covered in exoskeleton cells. These exoskeleton cells came from a level 29 conferred knight, allowing him to possess powerful defense from the moment he was born. Especially during the nurturing process, the exoskeleton armor on his body got increasingly thicker and stronger. It's almost comparable to the defense of a level 29 superior divine weapon. It can be said that he himself is a living weapon. The others nodded, looking at the battle in the mirror in anticipation. Why is there an aura of black magic on this guy? Tyrant, who was in the bangle, asked, Can you let me study it a little? I don't have the time. As they spoke, Fang Xingjian had already walked toward the 5th defense layer as if there was no one else around. The metallic strange person followed behind him with a provocative expression. As he walked, he said, Hey, didn't you hear me ask you a question? Seeing that Fang Xingjian continued to walk without any reaction, a hint of killing intent flashed on the metallic strange person's face. With a dash, he charged out toward Fang Xingjian like an armored tank. However, he had just gotten within 1 meter of Fang Xingjian when he felt a violent force striking his face. Simultaneously, a stream of martial will exploded in his mind. Scram! With a rumble, the metallic monster was sent flying along with layers upon layers of energy. While it was in midair, its entire head had been blasted apart by the boundless sword force. It fell to the ground, twitched a few times, and then became completely motionless. Then Fang Xingjian continued to walk toward the 5th defense layer, as if nothing had happened. He put out his sword fingers, and streams of sword force swept out in the air. They cut through the 5th defense layer like cutting through tofu, and he continued to enter deeper without stopping. To think that he crushed it with a single punch? The enraged lion looked at this scene in a daze and asked, Miss Fang, you're saying that the metallic strange person's exoskeleton armor is as strong as a level 29 divine weapon? Fang Qian frowned. That should be the case. I thought that the metallic strange person would be able to hold on for a few minutes. I didn't expect that he wouldn't even be able to take a single blow. The Phantom Knight let out a breath. That can only mean that Fang Xingjian's abilities have surpassed our estimations. At the thought of this, everyone in the meeting room gasped, feeling great admiration for the Phantom Knight's decision. If they had gone up against him without knowing Fang Xingjian's abilities, they would probably have been at a great disadvantage if they were not careful. Fang Qian said, Based on our previous information, Fang Xingjian is already a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. That's why the first prince got the supreme chief and the others to ambush him. By the looks of it, his abilities aren't to be underestimated even amongst demigods with 1 tier of perfection. The Phantom Knight nodded. Even I wouldn't dare to say they'll be able to get rid of the metallic strange person so easily. Feng Qian said, "After all, you're not a warrior who fights head-on. Illusory arts are what you're truly capable of." She then looked at the Phantom Knight with a burning gaze and said, "Since Feng Xingjian is so strong, then let's test out the combat abilities of number 9 and number 10. What do you think?" Hearing the mention of number 9 and number 10's experimental subjects, everyone present felt a chill in their hearts. It was because these two experimental subjects were too dangerous. When they were born, they had almost broken out of the base and escaped. In the end, everyone had to join forces to suppress them and get the Phantom Knight to control them with his illusory arts before they were stabilized. The Phantom Knight nodded solemnly. But number 9 and number 10 are things that are even more dangerous than Feng Xingjian. Once they show any signs of losing control, I'll have to stop their actions immediately. If they manage to kill Feng Xingjian but manage to escape, it'll be an even greater loss. Their value far surpasses that of Feng Xingjian. Feng Qian smiled. Of course. She subconsciously threw a glance at Feng Xingjian in a mirror and thought to herself, Feng Xingjian have a good taste of what true terror is. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.